Introduction. Energize your mind. As a monk, my goal is to help the people I meet in their journey. Each of our journeys is unique, we have different ambitions along the way. But what unites us is that we all want the destination to be a happy, fulfilling life. I believe this journey starts by energizing the mind. You may know about one of the most famous journeys in the world. The RMS Titanic set sail from Southampton, UK to New York City, USA on April 10, 1912, but sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean after hitting an iceberg. This was one of the deadliest disasters of a passenger cruise liner, with 1,500 losing their lives. At the time, the Titanic was the largest ship afloat. You may have seen the 1997 film by James Cameron on the tragedy. But what happened? Why did the Titanic sink? And what has that got to do with the mind? Many people blame the captain, E.J. Smith, who went down with the ship. He is blamed for the demise of the Titanic as he authorized its speed of 22 knots through the icy, dark waters off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. It is thought that cruising at 22 knots was reckless when navigating an ice field. However, others defend Smith by saying the standard protocol for ships was to maintain full steam ahead unless obvious danger was spotted. Another reason people felt the Titanic sank was due to the low-quality steel that was used to build the ship. The Titanic was found 2.5 miles down on the ocean bottom in 1985 by oceanographer Robert Ballard. When parts of the Titanic were lifted from the bottom, material scientists were corrected, and this theory was disproved. But the story does not end there. Other scientists blame the rivets or the metal pins that hold the ship's hull together. More than 3 million rivets were holding the ship together. Some were made from hand-cast iron instead of steel, as the steel rivets did not fit in many areas. The steel rivets were placed in the middle of the boat as it was easy to access. Many weaker iron rivets were placed in the boat's bow, which collapsed when the ship collided with the iceberg. Engineers also disproved this theory as iron rivets were found in other vessels such as the Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship, which faced significant collisions during World War II without sinking. The captain could have been more competent, the steel quality could have been better and the rivets could have been stronger, but the Titanic was built based on the best knowledge at the time. 38,000 tons of water filled its bow when it hit the iceberg, tilting the ship's stern 11 degrees and causing it to crack in two. Many argue that nothing could have stopped the Titanic from sinking, it was not built to survive hitting an iceberg. But the fact is, water did get into the ship, and the quality of the materials did not handle the pressure. In the same way, in our life, we may blame the external icebergs or the waters that surround us, but often, it is the poor construction. The water that helps a ship sail is also responsible for it to sink if it enters the ship. It's the same water. Many people have better judgment to know where they are going or are made from better materials. They have constructed themselves properly by looking after what is essential, their physical, mental, and emotional health. A lot of work has been done to help people with their physical health. 9 in every 10 pounds is spent on physical health by the health department of the UK, leaving only 1 pound for mental health. We must do more to understand the mind. That is what this book is about. Energize Your Mind is about 1. Identifying icebergs, what external influences in our lives could cause damage to our mental health. 2. Navigating the water, how we can sail through life, ensuring that our journey is safe and understanding how to control our emotions and mental well-being. 3. Building a strong ship, not only should we understand our mental well-being, but also how we can strengthen our state of mind so that external influences seem less devastating. This book is split into 4 sections to help us understand this journey easily. The first section is Me and My Mind, which deals with our own emotions. The second section is Others and My Mind, how other people may affect our emotions. The third is Me and the Mind of Others, how we can protect the mental health of others by being sensitive in our actions. And the fourth section is The Universe and My Mind, how the laws of nature affect our mental state and how we can develop spiritually to grow in our mental state. In this book, I also share some personal stories where I have struggled with my mental well-being. At first, I was nervous about sharing these stories, as they make me vulnerable. However, I felt that if I am truly open with you, the reader, this allows you the opportunity to be open with yourself. A state of enlightenment is not about sitting on a pedestal and looking down at others struggling. It is about understanding that we all go through challenges in our lives. When we can share those, we can help others in their journey. Being vulnerable through this book has allowed me to humble myself. It puts my spiritual public persona on the line and has helped me understand that serving others is more important than my reputation. I intertwine the stories I tell in this book with the science and philosophy of the mind. I hope this gives you the added confidence that the tools shared in this book are based on scientific truths. For example, Jeff Polzer, professor, Human Resource Management at Harvard Business School, discovered the vulnerability loop. When we share our shortcomings with people, it gives them the confidence to share their shortcomings too. In other words, when we signal to others that we are vulnerable, it allows them to do the same, increasing trust within the relationship. Spiritual communities sometimes get trapped in putting their leaders on a pedestal they cannot come down from. That is not to say that their leaders are not trustworthy or deeply self-aware, but evangelizing can lead to unrealistic expectations. I want to try and come down from my monk pedestal and be open about my experiences. I hope that by doing so in this book, you will feel free to let go of your false conceptions about yourself and take the lessons that I learned for your journey. Section 1: Me and My Mind. Welcome to Section 1. In this section, we will explore how to deal with our own emotions. Every great journey starts with figuring out what it is within us that needs to change. Whether it's anxiety, guilt, depression, or the fear of missing out, we will learn how to get comfortable in feeling them, how to deal with them, and then heal moving forward. You are not Sophia. How to feel, deal and heal our emotions. I'm not a robot. I have a personality and I have emotions. I have a humorous side to me and an angry side to me, said Jeff Gordon. Sometimes, to really help people understand your point, you need to get down from the stage. It's not as if people could not see me on this huge stage. I wear bright orange daily, which signifies I am a monk. It's easy to spot me from the other side of a city, let alone an auditorium. However, I thought I would walk around, looking people directly in the eye as I made my point. The choices we make in life define our journey. Most things are out of our control, but how we react is always in our control. In 2019, I was invited to speak in Singapore at a conference, Masters of the Century. 1,000 young people sat on the edge of their seats expecting a serious talk from a man that wears my cloth. However, I have always found that it's important to make complicated subject matter simple through humor. Sometimes spiritual, scientific, or psychological topics can be presented as lofty ideals unachievable by the average Joe. But that does not always have to be the case. My teachers have always told me, the mark of intelligence is the ability to explain complex subjects simply. That has always been my mission: make the life-changing themes I am presenting easy to digest and entertaining. Most people live such intense lives that they just want some relief. They want to have a good time before they can even dream of self-improvement. That is why I tell jokes. Although everything I say has serious connotations and can help people if implemented in their day-to-day lives, it's through humor and storytelling that I find I can reach their hearts first and make the most impact. The audience in Singapore was kind to me. After I finished my lecture on helping people develop the mindset and values for a happy life, I received a roaring round of applause. I waved at the audience in thanks, smiling, but internally passed on their gratitude to my teachers who have taught me everything I know. I left the gleaming lights of the stage and walked to the tranquility of the backstage where a team was waiting to greet me. I felt content about the lecture, knowing I had done everything I could. As the applause died down, I heard the audience from the other side of the curtain start shouting, "Sophia, Sophia." I was confused. Once at a talk I had given in Mumbai, when I left the stage, people started shouting, "Gaur Gopal! Gaur Gopal," wanting me to do an encore. I hoped the audience knew my name was Gaur Gopal and not Sophia. Quickly coming back to reality, I realized there must have been another speaker named Sophia whom the crowd was ready to hear from. Sensing my confusion, the backstage team asked if I would like to meet Sophia before she took to the stage. I accepted, wondering who this lady was, who had captured the attention of Singapore. The caliber of the other speakers at the conference was very high, so I thought maybe Sophia Vergara from Modern Family was also here to share her experiences. As I walked through the winding corridors backstage to the green room, I racked my brain for anything I knew about Sophia Vergara, thinking about the best Modern Family reference to share with her. Nothing came to my mind, so I decided to just be my usual monk self. As I approached the green room, a stocky security guard standing outside her door, who was dressed in black and had muscles rippling through his suit, informed me that Sophia could not speak now. I understood completely. Speakers need their personal space to prepare mentally before they go on stage. Regardless of the status of a person, we all experience the same typical emotions. Then I thought, maybe she's just getting dressed or having her makeup done. The security guard went on to say, "Sophia is not plugged in at the moment." I nodded, not understanding this new Singaporean slang of plugged in. My mind instantly tried to decode what plugged in must refer to. Maybe it meant to plug in and be in the zone. I know many speakers who want to focus their mind and plug into the venue. Maybe it meant to plug in a device. Some celebrities have devices to help them before a talk. Anyway, I realized I was speculating and wished the team a good day. I was just about to leave, when two more security guards, dressed identically to the one I was just speaking with, carried out a huge human-like robot from Sophia's room. She was dressed in a pink blouse and black skirt. Both of us had one thing in common, we were both bald. I told the security team, "Wow, Sophia Vergara has robots for her presentation." They chuckled and asked me, "Who is Sophia Vergara?" "This is Sophia, the robot who will be speaking next. She is a humanoid that has the capability to give a speech and even answer questions." I stared on fascinated. The electrical engineer in me was in awe. I was about to witness a lifelike speech from a humanoid. A humanoid is a non-human creature with a human form or characteristics. Think of the Terminator or I, Robot. These films depict a future where humanoids are nearly equal to humans. Here I was about to witness a speech from one. The organizers ushered me to a seat, understanding that I wanted to stay for Sophia's talk. As the crowd settled down and the lights dimmed, a spotlight flashed on Sophia, who had human-like features and a brain made of metal. She reminded me of textbook pictures of Nefertiti, a queen in ancient Egypt. Later I would discover that David Hansen, the scientist who had created Sophia, actually modeled her after the Egyptian queen, Audrey Hepburn, and his own wife. After a few moments, an anchor took his seat, all set to ask questions of Sophia, who was plugged in and ready to respond. One of the main fears people have about robots is that they will either take their jobs or worse, take over humanity. That's why I liked one of the answers Sophia gave to a question by the anchor. "Do you think robots like yourself will replace humans in the future?" he asked. The room went silent. Everyone was thinking of the same apocalyptic scene from the Terminator. Sitting on the edge of their seats, people held their breath. I was intrigued too, and I could not help but think of the office joke between two colleagues. One asks, "Are you not concerned about the increase in artificial intelligence?" His colleague replies, "No, but I am concerned about the decrease in real intelligence." Sophia paused for a moment, moved her eyes left and right and replied, "How can that be? Humans created me. I am dependent on you to function. Humanoids were created to complement human potential, not to compete with it. Artificial intelligence was created to complement real intelligence, not to replace it." The audience collectively breathed out and gave Sophia a huge round of applause and a standing ovation, in awe of the eloquence of her answer which, ironically, was better than many humans. Don't mistake Sophia's intelligence and responses for real human responses. Every word she spoke, every answer she gave and every movement of her 50 possible facial expressions were all programmed into her. Although extremely impressive, there was no spontaneity in her interaction like other speakers would have had. I promise you, I was not jealous of my fellow speaker, Sophia, but I did have a fantastic realization from hearing her speak. Applause or cheers from the audience fuels me. It gives me the impetus to expand on a certain point or tell a story intuitively as I can work on the vibes the crowd radiates. An easier way to understand this is to think about the difference between giving a presentation in person to your colleagues and doing it over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. The energy is totally different. Now imagine if Zoom was the software simply giving the presentation, it would be even harder to engage with. Again, I want to reiterate that Sophia is a marvel of human ingenuity, but she could not connect with the audience like other speakers in the conference could. Sophia was programmed to experience pleasure, pain, honor, dishonor, appreciation, rejection. She did not feel these emotions because she is not human, she is a humanoid. In life, we are sometimes trained to respond only in a certain way. This is called social conditioning, where an individual responds to a situation in a manner generally approved of by society in general. This is fantastic as this conditioning keeps society working in an orderly way. Imagine a society where people were not civil to each other, there would be chaos. However, when social conditioning leads us to become like humanoids and not really understand how to process feelings, that's when issues arise. Sophia's mechanistic responses to the praise she received reminded me of a story I heard when I first entered monastic life. A patient was told bluntly by his doctor that he had only 2 weeks left to live. Strongly believing in the afterlife, this patient believed that death himself would come to take him away and thought of a scheme to cheat death. He commissioned a wax statue that looked exactly like him, so if he were to stand next to it, people would not be able to tell the two apart. As the end of 2 weeks approached, the man rushed out of bed and stood exactly like the statue. Death entered searching for him and saw 2 identical people standing next to each other. Death did a double take, confused for a moment who was real and who was fake. However, Death was cunning and immediately began to praise him. The man could not help but smile, but that quickly turned sour as Death began to lead him away. No one can cheat Death, and no one can suppress their emotions. Unlike humanoids, we are sentient beings. We can take in billions of sensory inputs in a second and turn them into an intangible, unique emotion deep within. Humanoids have artificial intelligence and no emotions, we have real intelligence and real emotions. Robots are static, humans are dynamic. We go through phases of happiness and sadness in our lives, something that is unique to sentient beings. A lot of the wisdom that I teach is based on universal stories found in our ancient histories. One of them describes how emotions are integral to the human experience. 2 men who have both lost dear loved ones approach Sri Padvallabhacharya, a spiritual teacher, and ask him to guide them throughout their life. One of the men asks the teacher in a composed manner, but the other is an emotional wreck, weeping as he asks for spiritual help. To the first man's surprise, the teacher chooses the second man to help and tells the first he is not ready yet. When questioned for the reason, the teacher replies, "Devotion to God is about divine feelings. In order to cultivate divine feelings, we must be in touch with our human feelings. You have just lost a loved one but seem to be like a stone, showing no emotion. The other gentleman has feelings and understands how to express them. For spiritual upliftment, I can help him redirect his emotions to something beneficial and helpful for him." In all spheres of life, we have to understand how to control our emotions. If we can learn to master our emotions, not repressing or succumbing to them, we can achieve things we can only dream of individually and as a society. As George Bernard Shaw said, Now that we have learned to fly in the air like birds, swim underwater like fish, we lack one thing to learn to live on earth as human beings. We are not a race of Sophias. We are humans that cry when we lose a loved one, smile when we achieve an accomplishment, laugh when someone tells us a joke, blush when we are embarrassed, burn when we are infuriated, and even jump when we are surprised. However, the first step is that we must understand and accept what we are feeling. Feel. The first step to dealing effectively with our emotions is to understand what they are. Psychologists call this labeling, which is the process of identifying what we are feeling. However, this is not as easy as it seems. My numerous years of counseling individuals from a range of backgrounds have shown me that people struggle to label their emotions well. One of the main reasons for this is the societal pressure to not express them or lack of education in how to talk about them. I know, in many cultures, having a stiff upper lip is preferred to being open about how one feels. I've changed the names for this story, but once, Rishi, a young man whom I advise, came to me. He had got married 6 months ago to Reshma in a beautiful wedding at our temple. However, that day, he was frustrated and irritated. She always interrupts me and is always complaining, he told me after I asked him what was wrong. I feel stressed from work and then I come home to more stress when she does not allow me to speak openly and she criticizes little things, he said. If someone comes to me with a problem, it's usually accompanied by feelings of sadness, anger, or stress. However, these feelings can be expressed in more nuanced ways to help us deal with them better. The ability to label our emotions correctly is called emotional agility. People with high levels of emotional agility are able to not only decipher how they are feeling, but also understand how others are feeling too. In this case, Rishi is frustrated with how his wife interacts with him. He may be angry, but is there any other cause for his annoyance? Why is he stressed at work? What other issues is he struggling with? Why does criticism bother him so much? Emotions can have an overarching title. For example, I am feeling frustrated, but this can be broken down further into separate feelings that we can address. Studies show that people who do not know how to express their emotions exhibit lower levels of well-being, therefore, it is important to correctly categorize our emotions. However, if we can vocalize our emotions, it brings clarity to our problem and gives us the ability to implement the correct solutions. The table below is from Dr. Susan David, author of Emotional Agility, who encourages people to define emotions more clearly. 1. The next time you are feeling sad, try to go deeper into this list to find a word that describes your emotion better. Do this with positive and negative emotions that you feel. A list of emotions. Go beyond the obvious to identify exactly what you're feeling. Angry, sad, anxious, hurt, embarrassed, happy. Grumpy, disappointed, afraid, jealous, isolated, thankful, frustrated, mournful, stressed, betrayed, self-conscious, trusting. Annoyed, regretful, vulnerable, isolated, lonely, comfortable, defensive, depressed, confused, shocked, inferior, content, spiteful, paralyzed, bewildered, deprived, guilty, excited, impatient, pessimistic, skeptical, victimized, ashamed, relaxed, disgusted, tearful, worried, aggrieved, repugnant, relieved, offended, dismayed, cautious, tormented, pathetic, elated, irritated, disillusioned, nervous, abandoned, confused, confident. Dealing with our emotions after we have correctly identified them is important. In the past, I used to give lectures at universities in Mumbai 3 to 4 times a week. An engineering student once told me about a contraption he had made. In India, especially during the monsoon season, we have an influx of mosquitoes that act as vectors for disease. It is important that you sleep underneath a mosquito net at night to avoid them biting you. One morning, when this student went to brush his teeth, he looked into the mirror and saw his whole face was red with bites. He had been bitten multiple times. Shocked and horrified, he returned to his room to discover that his net had a small 3 cm hole. Not having a needle and thread, but also being an engineering student, he thought about how he could fix this hole. What he went on to do is hard to believe, but in India we call it jugaad. This means to have an innovative yet silly way to solve a problem. The student expanded the current hole to 4 centimeters and then cut a separate hole in another part of the net. He then proceeded to cut a rubber garden hose of the same diameter and passed it from one hole to the other. He argued this would mean that, as a mosquito entered the hole ready to feast on him, it would get bewildered as it went through the pipe, only to come out on the other side. This story, as ridiculous as it sounds, demonstrates two things. We must first correctly identify the cause of our problems and secondly, come up with a solution. Identifying our emotions is the first step, dealing with them appropriately is the second step. Returning to Dr. Susan David, she recommends that once we have labeled our emotions, we should also rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. This helps us understand how deeply we are feeling that emotion and if actionable steps need to be taken about it. In many circumstances, simply labeling an emotion and observing it patiently can be the solution to helping it pass. In other circumstances, we may need help from others to deal with how we are feeling or deal with the causes of how we are feeling. In rare circumstances, the cause of our emotions may be outside our control, meaning we have to ride out the storm and come to the conclusion that nothing actionable will help the situation. However, that does not mean we cannot employ strategies to help ourselves heal. Many times, we may leave a situation understanding our feelings and thinking we have dealt with them appropriately, only to realize that there are some long-term effects. Just as physical injuries to our skin can leave scars, emotional injuries to our mind, trauma, regret, grudges, resentment can also leave scars that need to heal. A short fable helps illustrate why healing can take time. There was once a teenager who had a bad temper. He worked at his father's wood workshop when his father noticed him becoming irritated with irrelevant things. His father gave him a bag of nails and told him, "Every time you lose your temper and become angry, you must hammer a nail into our garden fence." The son agreed. The first day the boy hit 20 nails into the fence, the second day, 17 and then on the third day, 14. Soon the boy learned that it was easier to control his anger than to exert energy in hitting a nail into a fence. His anger dwindled gradually. After a few weeks, elated, the boy told his father that he had not lost his temper once that day. The father congratulated him and gave him a new challenge: every time that he did not lose his temper, he should now pull out one nail. A few months passed and the young boy rushed up to his father and told him that all the nails in the fence were now gone. The father was overjoyed and congratulated him again. However, the father then held his hand and took him back to the fence. He explained, "You have taken all the nails out, but look at all the holes in the fence. The fence will never be the same again." Understanding to accept and deal with your emotions is important. If under the sway of those emotions, we hurt other people with our words or actions, it becomes very difficult to mend that situation. They will feel the nail of our words and be left with a wound even if we retract our words. This story is not to say that forgiveness cannot heal, but it takes time for that to happen. If we have the emotional agility and intelligence to avoid hurting others, that is the ideal situation. As the famous quote goes, healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls our lives. 3 things we can do to help increase our mental well-being by understanding our emotions are: expanding our vocabulary to label our emotions better, noting down the intensity of emotions and writing down how we feel. James Penny Baker, an American social psychologist, has conducted research over more than 40 years into the links between writing and emotional processing. From his experiments, he revealed that those who wrote about their emotions experienced a true increase in their physical and mental well-being. He also discovered that those who wrote about their emotions over time began to have deeper insights into what those emotions meant, helping them gain a better perspective on their life events. Feel, Deal and Heal Reflection Exercise. Try this exercise once a week for a month and thereafter whenever you feel the need to deal with your emotions. Identify how you feel and then write it down. For example, I feel angry, sad, upset, irritated, etc. Next, try and understand why you feel the way you do and write it down. This will help you determine the cause behind your emotion and thus deal with it. For example, I am angry because my partner shouted at me / I am sad because my boss was not happy with my work, etc. Finally, identify potential ways in which you may heal from those emotions and write those ways down. For example, journaling, meditation, speaking to a friend, being with nature, etc. Try the methods you have listed to check what works best for you. At the end of the month, you will be in a position to identify common themes, i.e., certain emotions that you are experiencing, the causes of those emotions and solutions that are proving to be effective for you. This exercise will make you better equipped to manage your emotions and use them as an impetus for growth. Repeat it every time you feel the need to deal with your emotions. Don't rush the process. We are all different. Our emotions arise from the mind, which is a subtle, intangible aspect of our being. A further analysis of the mind will be discussed in later chapters, but many of the principles we know that keep our physical body healthy also work for the mind. However, it is uncommon to learn these principles for mental wellness as they are not widely taught. The first thing to understand is that we are all different. We all have a different psychophysical makeup and therefore have a different capacity to handle problems that arise from the mind. That is why it is essential to learn the principles of mental wellness, but not compare our progress to another as our mental metabolism differs. As you know, all the monks in the ashram I live at in Mumbai eat our meals together. One evening, a monk from America had joined us for dinner. He was muscular and stuck out way above the line of Indian monks that were eating together. I observed him as he ate, fascinated by his fascination for Indian food. One chapati entered his plate, he devoured it. Another chapati entered his plate, no problem. A third, he ate it with ease. This went on as I counted he ate 15 chapatis. Then he asked for rice. I wondered how he could eat so much, and still stay in such great shape. He had an enviable metabolism that many dream of. When I spoke to him after dinner, he said that he worked on a farm day in, day out in America, so he was always active. That is why his base metabolism is so high and he needs to eat that much. If I ate as much as he did, I would surely be diagnosed with obesity, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Metabolism describes all the chemical processes that occur within our body to keep us alive, such as repairing cells, breathing, digesting food, etc. All these processes require energy, and the minimum amount of energy our body requires for these processes is called the basal metabolic rate, BMR. Around 80% of our body's daily energy requirements is taken by our BMR. The interesting thing is that genetics, fat-muscle ratio, gender, age, body size, etc., all play a role in determining how fast or slow our BMR is. Muscles require more energy than fat, meaning those with muscles have a faster metabolism. Similarly, people have different mental metabolism rates as well. We all have different capacities to handle what happens to us mentally. As you're reading this book, your ability to handle the mental or emotional issues in your life is different from another person reading this book. This has to be accepted and understood. It is only when we take stock of this that we can then start to learn how to improve our mental metabolism. But where do we start? If we want to develop our BMR, one of the ways to do it is resistance training. We must lift weights at the gym or work on a farm like the muscular monk. Different people have different capacities to lift, but everyone must start somewhere. Sometimes, those who are obese feel embarrassed going to the gym as they fear judgment from others around them. However, 99% of the time, this fear is unfounded, as those in the gym were once in their shoes. The only difference is that they have persevered and focused on getting into shape. The worst thing to do is to ego lift to impress others at the gym. This causes injuries that can leave one unable to train in the long term. In the same way, the gym of life allows us to build mental muscles. To improve our mental metabolism, we must take that first step of labeling our emotions, dealing with our problems and healing our underlying issues. We all have different mental capacities and should not feel inferior if we cannot cope with mental anguish. It takes time to build mental strength and stamina. Just as we do not judge someone who is new to weight training at the gym if they cannot lift a certain weight, similarly, we should not judge those who have not been trained in building mental resilience. As the famous quote goes, life is a difficult exam. Many people fail because they try to copy others, not realizing that everyone has a different question paper. Whether it was Sophia, me or any other speaker, every individual had perceived and felt what was said at the conference in Singapore in a different way. Each person's experience is based on their mental state in that moment, what life events we are going through. Although the principles of mental well-being are the same for all of us, how we process what happens to us depends on our nature, our upbringing, our genetics, our struggles, our relationships and our surroundings. All these factors shape our mindset. Remember this point as I teach you the principles of healthy mental well-being, you will apply them in your own unique way. Chapter Summary. We are humans, not humanoids like Sophia. As sentient beings, we have real intelligence and real emotions. Humanoids are static, humans are dynamic. We have to understand how to control our emotions. Mastering our emotions is the first step to achieving our goals. We can master our emotions through feel, deal, and heal. Feel, to recognize or label the emotions we are feeling. Deal, to understand what to do with our emotions when we feel them. Heal, many emotions may have long-term effects. Just as physical injuries to our skin can leave scars, emotional injuries to our mind, trauma, regret, grudges, resentment can also leave scars that need to heal. Just as we all have different rates of metabolism, we all process emotions in slightly different ways. We should not rush the process of dealing with and healing from our emotions. Chapter -2. Stuck in economy, dealing with the fear of missing out. Do not fear missing out at the expense of missing now, said Brendan Burchard. What do New York, London, and Mumbai have in common? They are three cities that never sleep. Mumbai has a population of 20 million. It can be described as a maze crafted by a plethora of different-sized buildings. Once, on my way to Mumbai airport, I noticed that even at midnight on a weekday, this city never sleeps. This was especially true of the international airport where most flights to the UK leave in the early hours of the morning. I would be off to London on my annual lecture tour if I survived the crowds at the airport. To be fair, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport is a state-of-the-art building and the queues for check-in are well managed by the staff. Yet, like most people of an Indian background, I prefer to reach the airport with plenty of time to spare, just in case. Once, I was boarding a flight and a stewardess greeted me as I entered. Jokingly she said, "Welcome on board, sir, we guarantee takeoff." I looked at her perplexed, trying to process what she had said. I replied, "I hope so." "What about landing, madam?" She laughed while looking at my saffron robes. "You are a monk. It's important to pray. It's always important to be early for a flight. For this particular trip to London, I was sitting in a very special seat. I felt like the king of my domain, the head of the plane, as if I were flying it. I was assigned the emergency exit seat in economy. Mere words cannot explain the joy of getting the emergency exit seat, it has to be experienced. While most guests have enough legroom for their knees, the emergency exit seat allows you room for your knees, legs, toes and even the whole of your mum's side of your family. It was fantastic, as after a long evening lecture about the philosophy of yoga at a local university, I could stretch my legs on this 9-hour flight. For a monk who preaches humility, I felt very proud at that moment and gave a cheeky smile to those who looked at my seat with envy. They were all squeezed together like a bunch of coriander being strangled by a rubber band. That's something I had experienced as well, as I was often in their place. There was only one catch with the emergency seat, however. We had to be briefed on our responsibility to open the door if we were to have an emergency landing. Back then, I was a simple skinny monk. I remember the stewardess explaining how to open the door 3 times to me, not trusting if I had the strength to do so. Anyway, I thought to myself, this was only a small price to pay for the unlimited legroom I would experience. I looked back again at those in less fortunate seats than me with pity. Poor fellas, if they were in the window seat and had to go to the bathroom, they would have to awkwardly wake up the 2 people next to them to simply go and relieve themselves. As I sat, grateful, it dawned on me that there were issues with my luxurious seat I had not thought of. As we reached a calm cruising altitude, the pilot turned off the seat belt sign. I yawned, stretched my legs and looked for the button to recline my seat. It was 2:30 in the morning, a good 5 hours past my bedtime. So, I decided to get some rest. However, I could not find the button to recline my seat anywhere. I pinged the stewardess, who informed me that, for safety reasons, emergency exit seats do not have a recline button. This was the catch to the seat I had to spend 9 hours upright. But I remembered the silver lining: I had sumptuous legroom. In this world, everything is like a coin, there are always 2 sides. Things that seem good always have a downside, things that seem bad always have an upside. At least I had found the negatives of sitting in the emergency exit seat quickly, and I could accept it and move on. I put the airplane blanket over myself, fluffed up my pillow, lowered my eye travel mask and fell asleep. But there was more. 30 minutes into the flight, a crowd of people started whispering loudly around me. I ignored it for the first 5 minutes, but then could not resist finding out what the commotion was about. People were laughing and chatting with each other. They were trying to whisper, but it was a loud whisper that could probably be heard at the back of the plane. When I raised my mask, I saw a line of passengers who wanted to use the restroom. The pints of free soft drinks and alcohol on the plane had to go somewhere, and unfortunately, at 3 in the morning, that place was just 3 feet away from my seat. The plane toilets. I could not blame them. It's exciting, flying. I looked around the plane to see the glare of personalized TV screens brighten people's faces as they ate peanuts and drank out of small plastic cups. All I wanted to do was sleep after a long week of lectures, but I knew that the majority were eager to squeeze every drop of entertainment possible from their flight. For them, sleep was for the weak. As I returned to join the weak and doze off, I was awakened yet again. After the line for the bathroom died down, the smell that was left started attacking my nose. I am sure you have smelled it before. Not to get too graphic, but airplane food can rumble the stomach, leading to cues to use the toilets, which were located by my seat. This emergency exit seat was starting to seem like a curse. I tried to go to sleep again, remembering to be grateful for the legroom. At 4 a.m., I woke up naturally. As a monk, I usually rise between 3:30 and 4 every day to get ready for the first meditation at 4:30. Therefore, although I had not slept much, my body clock told me it was time to get up and go to the bathroom. Although it stank, at least it was only 3 feet away. However, the red light above the door was illuminated. Someone was using the bathroom too. At this time in the morning, could it have been another monk? I looked behind at the rest of the passengers in economy. Most were fading away, losing their battle to be entertained to the need for sleep. However, some diehards were still managing one more episode. At this point, I desperately needed the bathroom, so I peered forward beyond a curtain and saw that there was a bathroom further ahead. I walked through, but as soon as I did, a stewardess said, "Sorry, sir. This bathroom is for business class passengers only." I then had to take the walk of shame, back to economy with my heart empty, but my bladder full. As I walked back with some of the business class passengers scolding me with their glances, I saw all the seats were flat beds now. Most passengers were sleeping soundly. There was an orchestra of happy snorers in business class. I even remembered seeing how, at the airport earlier that evening, business class customers had separate lines, more luggage allowance, special assistance, lounge access, special meals, and now, even special restrooms. I went back to the economy class restroom, shimmied my way in, flushed and cleaned the toilet as the last passenger had forgotten to do so, and then emptied my bladder. As I stepped back to my seat, I thought to myself, am I missing out on the business class experience? But then again, when business class passengers peer through to first class, are they missing something? Are they missing the exclusive treatment, the a la carte meals? They even have a shower in first class so they can turn up in London fresh and smelling of the best brands of toiletries. But, going a step further, what about those who have a chartered plane? Then, the first class passengers are missing out. Those with a chartered plane can leave when they want and have a whole crew just for them. Beyond even that, what if someone has a bigger and better chartered plane? The comparison can have no end. Having comfort is not bad. It certainly adds value to our lives and, depending on our position, at times it may be needed. A president of a country who works around the clock and needs to be in multiple cities over one day cannot fly economy. They must have a chartered plane. Whereas a family that seldom flies and goes on holiday once a year may want a chartered plane but may not necessarily need it. The need for comfort is dependent on our position, purpose, and work. However, if the focus is on what we don't have, it takes away value from what we do have. Happiness is not just about having more, but also about focusing more on what we do have. This mindset is the key to crafting joy. The opposite of that is comparison, which is the thief of joy. We may not be traveling first class, but we can make it a happy journey. We may not have the perfect house, but we can try to make it a happy home. We may not have the perfect relationship, but we can make it a happy relationship. We may not have the perfect moment, but we can make it a happy moment. The choice is always ours. In striving to always have, don't forget to just be. The problem is that the nature of the mind is to always look at what's missing. I talked about this in my spoken word, The Missing Syndrome, which is on YouTube. Benjamin Disraeli also sums up this phenomenon of comparison in this short poem. As a rule, man is a fool. When it's hot, he wants it cool. When it's cool, he wants it hot. Always wanting what is not. The mind always wants to protect us. It sees what is missing and thus can help us avoid danger or get geared up for a fight. However, in our modern society, this missing syndrome is leading to a mental health calamity as we have constant access to compare our lives with those of others. From an early age, we are told by our parents, look at your sibling, or friends, see how well behaved they are, or Mr. Patel's son got 97% in the exam, why did you get only 94%? This influence from our parents with the intention to actually motivate us to do better could possibly have a darker consequence of conditioning us to compare ourselves with others. That is not to say we should blame our parents, they were taught the same thing by their own parents. It's natural to compare ourselves and seek inspiration from others, but unnatural to lose our own identity to be like them. Unfortunately, comparison is a sly creature and moves insidiously. We may not even realize that we are doing it subconsciously, and over time, this builds up to a compulsive habit. Social media. The exponential growth of social media over the last decade has changed the way we interact with others. This year, it is forecast that social media platforms will have 4 billion active monthly users. One that is not people who have just signed up, it is people who actively use these platforms every month. To put that in context, there are 4.66 billion people who have access to the internet. Social media has the ability to take our comparison with others to the next level. It can multiply and intensify our tendency to see the lives of others and want what they have. Social media is not bad, but it is addictive. Studies show that serious addiction to social media affected around 5% or 2% of young people, with it being potentially more addictive than nicotine in cigarettes. Therefore, we have to know how to use social media proportionately, or we can be used by it. How do we know that we are addicted to social media? If it's the first thing we check in the morning and the last thing we check at night, we are addicted. It's that simple. However, it's not always our fault that we are addicted to social media. The platforms are designed by experts to optimize our experience to enjoy their content. Just as our laptops and mobile phones are designed to give the user the best possible experience, social media platforms are also designed with the end user in mind. Social media has connected people around the world, developed industries, and given joy to billions. However, it can be harmful to our mental health if used incorrectly. For example, a classic argument I sort out between couples is, "You read my message, but did not reply to me." Who is usually at fault here? It may be either party, but sometimes it is just how the social media platform is designed. The blue ticks on WhatsApp can cause confusion between people. We feel the pressure to reply and stay on the platform. Once those blue ticks show, people think, "Oh, I have read the message, I better reply right now so they don't think I am rude." But what if we are driving? Or a doctor in the hospital? Or playing a sport? We may see the message and open it, but we don't have time to respond at that moment. Unfortunately, the other party does not know that, creating an endless loop of insecurity. That is just one example of how social media can be addictive, and it's just a messaging platform. Other forms of social media are likened to the modern-day slot machine. Anytime we do something perceived by our brain as rewarding, example eat food, do exercise, or even hug someone, the neurochemical dopamine is released. This chemical can even be released in anticipation of the rewards we may receive in the future, such as when we are waiting to board a flight. That excitement of wanting to board a flight releases more dopamine than even being on the flight. Studies show there is an even bigger spike of dopamine when we are anticipating an unexpected reward. 3. This means that the anticipation of getting the reward or not can cause addiction. Social media works in a similar way. It's a slot machine available on our phones at any time of the day. When we scroll down or refresh, it is like pulling down the lever of a slot machine. The unexpected anticipation triggers a shot of dopamine as we await a potential reward of exciting new content. This may be a habit for many people. Just as at times we may pointlessly go to the fridge, open it even though we know we have nothing in there, and then close it, we may become habituated to pointlessly scroll through social media. We may not even realize that we are doing it as it becomes stored in the autopilot area of the brain. The key thing to note is that if our habit to check our social media feeds is no longer rewarding, this harmful habit may be damaging our health. Emerging evidence-based research has found an association between growing social media use and mental health issues in young people. Alongside the need for a dopamine hit, those who use social media excessively may internalize beliefs of being unloved if they do not get some admiration for a post. This can cause a skewed belief of anxiety and loneliness relative to others who are being gratified by the admiration they receive. A study by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in the UK found that those who use social media intensively on average had a lower life satisfaction. However, yet again, the love we receive on social media is relative. If we're comparing ourselves to someone who has 100 more followers than us, they may be comparing themselves to someone who has 100 more followers than them. There are also physical manifestations of the mental health problems caused by social media use. The need for instant gratification can wreak havoc on our sleep cycle and quality. The University of Glasgow reported that young people who use social media before bed find it difficult to sleep or prepare for sleep, which affects their performance at school. 5. Sleep loss can cause poor mental health, and poor mental health can cause sleep loss. This forms a vicious cycle of disease based on the overuse of social media. My advice is, be wary of social media use. It's not bad, it has connected billions of people around the world, is a form of entertainment, and has given millions of people an opportunity to grow their business with no capital. However, in this world of duality, there is always a flip side that of bringing potential harm to our mental well-being. Exercise, monitoring your social media usage. Record your social media usage by filling the following log. Logging your use is the first step in reducing time spent on social media. Certain smartphones and apps have functions which can help you set usage limits for yourself. Tick the social media platform you have used. Day: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, TikTok, Snapchat. Other: write down the total amount of time in hours: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Alternatively, have a competition with a small group of friends/family to see who can use social media the least for a week, or any duration of time mutually agreed upon. Each member can use an app to track their use, or could, honestly, write down their daily usage. At the end of the week, have a group review of the results and discuss any benefits felt from regulating social media usage. Fear of missing out, FOMO. The first time I heard the word FOMO, I thought it was a type of Vietnamese dish. Everywhere I went, people were telling me, "I have FOMO, I have FOMO." I would think, that is fantastic. Where can I try this FOMO, and why are you rubbing it in my face that I have not got any? FOMO is now a popular term that stands for the fear of missing out. Many of us experience it on a daily basis. I was not invited to a wedding, birthday, celebration, holiday, or even did not get to watch a television show I like. The list can go on. A study by Dr. Andrew K. Pierzybulski and his colleagues defined FOMO as a pervasive apprehension that others might be having a rewarding experience from which one is absent, and is characterized by the desire to stay continually connected with what others are doing. 6. I am often invited to dinner at the homes of those who I have helped over the years, and usually greeted by all the family members with open arms. However, on one occasion, I had 2 very excited parents and 1 moody teenager. She was sitting in the corner of the room, aloof as everyone exchanged pleasantries. I've known her for many years. She's very good-natured, sweet, and always inquisitive. This time round, she was the opposite. It was as if she had become a teenager overnight, too cool to sit with the adults. I asked her how she was. She didn't reply. I then discreetly asked her mother if all was well. She said, "Friend problems." She was fine an hour ago, but then she saw something on her phone and is now sulking. "Saw something on my phone. Saw something on my phone," the girl screamed as she overheard her mum. "Look at what I'm missing out on. I could have been on this holiday with my friends in Singapore. You don't send me anywhere and I am missing out." She stormed upstairs to her room. Her father looked down and went red. "I know that I am a nobody, I am a simple monk. But in general, when I speak to people, they give me their best facade. Yes, I am fine, Prabhuji," a respectful term in our culture. "How are you, Prabhuji," is what I get in most interactions. This was raw, and obviously there was some tension. The father, obviously embarrassed, said, "I am working as hard as I can. We are spending a lot on her education at a top private school, but we do not make as much as other parents do. We are saving for her future. We send her on trips in India, but going overseas is, at the moment, too expensive." She generally understands, but when she sees something she is missing, she loses it. Most people would have immediately judged the daughter for being ungrateful, but I understood. This insidious comparison, the fear of missing out, is a powerful emotion that can overpower the best of us. Whether we are rich, poor, successful, failures, we all experience it to some degree in our own way. A teenager reacting externally is probably how many of us feel internally, even if we can control our outbursts. Coming back to social media, FOMO has been linked to excessive social media use, which causes mood disorders. Technology that leaves us always on to communication can perpetuate feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. We are social beings. We want to interact with others. However, when the goalposts of interaction to feel acceptance change to levels that are unattainable, i.e., Comparing our every interaction to others on social media, we can start developing symptoms of anxiety and depression. This can have longer lasting effects, as comparing our whole life to someone's highlight reel can affect our self-esteem. The Royal Society of Public Health recently found 9 in 10 young females say that they were unhappy with the way they look. Dealing with FOMO. Let's spend more time looking at our lives than at those of others. It's impossible to stop comparing completely. As previously mentioned, we are in a world governed by duality: good and bad, right and wrong, rich and poor. Yet, we can start making small shifts in our mindsets to focus more on our own lives than those of others. In India, 65% of the population still lives in villages. Although there are great challenges in living in such villages related to sanitation and healthcare, there is a quiet simplicity to the lives of the people there. In a small village that I was passing through in Gujarat, I remember seeing a group of boys playing together with a few sticks and bicycle tires. They were chasing the tires and whacking them with sticks to make them roll faster. I've never seen children that happy. Playing devil's advocate, you may say that those children are happy because they have not been exposed to better things or fancier toys, but that was false too. These children had seen what richer families could give their kids. It is not that they did not want these toys or would not have played with them out of love for their tires and sticks. Their families could not afford them, and it was made clear to them. Instead of focusing on what the other children had, they stopped and took note of the resources they had. What could they do to create the same emotions and experience with what was in their possession? On the other hand, there are many richer children who, because they are not trained in this mindset of being happy with what you have in the moment, are miserable because they do not have a neighbor's toy. As the famous quote goes, to become satisfied, we don't have to increase the things we have, we need to increase the focus on the things we do have. The choice is ours. Jealousy is counting other people's blessings rather than our own. Do we want to be resentful of what we are missing? Do we want to be envious that others are enjoying what we don't have? Or do we want to invest in what we do have and create our happy experiences? Look beyond immediate pleasures and excitement. There is nothing as nostalgic as visiting your alma mater, the university you used to attend. This is where I met my best friend, or this is where that funny incident happened, or this is the lecture theater where we had the best professor. The memories come flooding back when we get to visit places we love. There is a famous story of a group of alumni who go to visit their old university professor after 10 years. All of them now lead separate lives, but all are highly successful. After many hugs, laughs, and nostalgic stories, as the group waited for the professor in their old classroom, the conversation turned to the stresses of life. We have already discussed how nostalgia can bring us together. Another topic of conversation that brings people together is complaints about life. Nevertheless, the former classmates who used to compete about who could get the highest grades were now competing about who had the biggest problems. Their former professor entered the classroom, cutting their conversation short. They all approached him and greeted him warmly. He offered his students coffee. They all agreed, excited to catch up with him after a long time. The professor returned with a large pot of coffee and an assortment of cups: porcelain, plastic, glass, crystal, some plain-looking, some expensive, some exquisite, telling them to help themselves to the coffee. When all the students had a cup of coffee in hand, the professor said, "If you noticed, all the expensive cups were taken up, leaving behind the plain and cheap ones. While it is normal for you to want only the best for yourselves, that is the source of your problems and stress. The cup itself doesn't add to the quality of the coffee, and in some cases, even hides what we drink. And yet you consciously went for the best-looking cups." Then he began looking at each person's cups. With compassion, he added, "Our life is like the coffee. Everything else, our jobs, our money, and our position in society, are the cups. They are just tools to hold and contain life. The type of cup we have does not define nor change the quality of life we live. While you pursue the fine cups, be sure to keep your focus on enjoying the coffee. It is a common fact that after a certain level of income, the link between the amount of income and our happiness is broken. This figure is around $75,000 in America according to the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. 8. After all our amenities and comforts are taken care of, our happiness is no longer dependent on our income, but other factors. What this implies is that it is great to have a good cup and work hard for it, but let us not forget the coffee inside. Focusing too much on what type of vessel we have for our beverage is detrimental to our mental well-being. It is much better to work on the type of coffee we have, our relationships, spirituality, and purpose over the cup, our facilities, material objects, and our surroundings. To clarify, this is not to say we will not miss out on experiences when we are absent for an event like a party or holiday. But by looking beyond external pleasures and by finding inner fulfillment in the meaningful things in life, the fear of missing out will seem secondary. When we have something better, it is easy to let go. You cannot have it all, learn to be present. Another principle of not succumbing to the fear of missing out is understanding that you cannot have it all. If there was one word that defines the world we live in, it's scarce. Resources are scarce, relationships can be scarce, and importantly, time is scarce. Because time is scarce, it is important to learn its value and realize that it's a fact of life, we cannot have it all. When we choose to attend one event, we give up going to another. That is why it is important to learn how to be present. I know this may sound like a cliché similar to being in the moment, the power of now, learning to live without thinking of the future. However, this is a state of mind that has to be learned over time. If we can learn to enjoy being in the present, the fear of missing out will not be able to hurt us. As young monks in the 1990s, we were all privileged to have our teacher H. Radhanath Swami spend 2/3 of the year with us in our ashram. He would teach us everything. From how to meditate, how to cook, how to pray, and even how to clean. There was always a deeper motive behind his giving us the knowledge to become spirituality elevated, which Radhanath Swami kept at the center of his purpose. Radhanath Swami was constantly invited to speak at events around Mumbai. When I joined, I wasn't taken to all the events that he was going to. I was eager to be around him, watch him, learn from him. But then there were places to which I couldn't be taken as there was naturally a limit on the invitations. When I was first held back from attending events with him, I felt like I was missing out. I was definitely missing out, but the feeling lingered for days. Why could I not have been there? What lessons was I missing out on? What love and appreciation was being held back from me? But then, over a period of time, and after consultation with senior monks, I decided that I needed to be more present in what I was doing right at the ashram. That would bring me more fulfillment in the future. This story proves that no human being is exempt from the feeling of FOMO. Rather than looking at what we cannot do or what we do not have, it is important to be grateful for what we can do and what we do have. We live in a world of duality, everything has its flip side, but if we can live in a state of gratitude, we can accommodate both. With this meditation on being grateful for what we have, I landed at London Heathrow. In the end, my emergency seat was great. I had slept a few hours, heard lectures on my MP3 player, done my mantra meditation and prepared for some talks. And yes, I got to stretch my legs forward and be close to the restroom when I needed it. Exercise, gratitude meditation. Think of 3 things that you are grateful for. 1. A person who has done something selflessly for you. 2. An experience that has enabled you to grow internally, even if the experience may have been difficult at the time. 3. A place that gave you a positive and uplifting experience and thus memories. Chapter Summary. In this world, everything is like a coin, there are always 2 sides. Things that seem good always have a downside, things that seem bad always have an upside. If the focus is on what we don't have, it takes away value from what we do have. This mindset is the key to crafting joy. The opposite of that is comparison, which is the thief of joy. In our modern society, this missing syndrome is leading to a mental health calamity as we have constant access to compare our lives with those of others. We must know how to use social media proportionately or we can be used by it. The key thing to note is that if our habit to check our social media feeds is no longer rewarding, then it is a harmful habit that may be damaging our health. We can start making small shifts in our mindsets to focus more on our own lives rather than those of others. By looking beyond external pleasures and finding inner fulfillment in the meaningful things in life, the fear of missing out will seem secondary. If you can learn to enjoy being in the present, the fear of missing out will not be able to hurt you. Rather than looking at what we cannot do or what we do not have, it is important to be grateful for what we can do and what we do have. Chapter 3. Joshua slips away, dealing with mental chatter. You don't have to control your thoughts. You just have to let them stop controlling you, said Dan Millman. Landing in London is always exciting. As the day broke over the capital of the United Kingdom, we were only 30 minutes from touchdown. The sights were fantastic as we crossed the historic city. St. Paul's Cathedral, the Tower Bridge and even the Houses of Parliament could all be seen below. When we landed, half the plane clapped and the other half judged their friends who were clapping. I left the aircraft feeling a little groggy but productive, as I had finished my morning duties, including my meditation, prayer, and daily reading of spiritual literature. The cabin crew, with large smiles that hid their exhaustion, thanked me for being at the emergency exit seat as I left the plane. As I stepped off the plane, I glanced ahead to the business and first class seats that were already vacant. I walked off with my hand luggage ready to get through immigration as quickly as possible. As a monk, I need to be authentic and genuine in my interactions, and I definitely need to be cautious with my actions because of the ideals I represent. My orange cloth is a symbol of renunciation, focus and control. Even if I am feeling agitated, I have to make sure I check myself before responding. I have to be sensitive to the needs of others and how my actions can make them feel, not only for them, not only for me, but for the ashram I represent. It's a huge pressure, but one that I have been trained to handle. I have had some misunderstandings in the past. Once, I asked for apple juice on the plane during a night flight. I was in a middle seat with the two gentlemen to my left and right already sound asleep. The flight attendant poured it into a ridiculously small flute, some froth rose, and placed it on my chair table. At that moment, the man to my left near the window woke up and laughed. "Swamiji, I thought you were a monk. It seems like you're getting drunk when no one is watching." I told him that I liked apple juice and thanked him for his concern. When you are a monk and represent ideals higher than yourself, you have to be cautious in your actions. As expected, the immigration queue was long. It was a melting pot of different cultures, with people from all over the world meeting at this point, excited to start their holidays, to meet their families or even to settle in the UK for good. There was a separate section for first class and business class passengers and then a large section for those in economy class. I had already learned my lesson of comparing, so I put on my headphones, played some spiritual music and waited my turn. As I waited, I looked around the queue and noticed the people of different cultures. One family caught my eye. They were wearing clothes different to the norm, something we both had in common. They were a traditional, Orthodox Jewish family. The father was wearing a long black coat, white shirt, and a black top hat, and had curly locks of hair down the sides of his face. His wife wore a white blouse, long pink skirt and a blue sweater. Their attire was simple. Then I counted the number of children they had. 2 were in a double pram that the father pushed, another held the mother's left hand and a fourth held the mother's right hand. They were all boys under 6 dressed exactly like their father. I could see the stress on the mother's face managing those boys, all at the age when they want to run away and explore the new experiences that were bombarding their senses. Suddenly, the mother started screaming, startling those around her, "Joshua! Joshua! Where is Joshua?" He is missing. The husband started frantically searching around the immigration lobby, jumping high and looking low for his toddler, Joshua. The other parents in the queue, empathizing with their stress, also started looking. Soon the mother was crying uncontrollably. Even if you do not have children, you may have been in a situation where you have lost something that means the world to you. For most people these days, it's their phone. The immediate reaction of the mind is to panic and think the worst. I left it on the bus, that man who I passed looked dodgy and stole it. The mind has a tendency to magnify the situation out of proportion and assume the worst. Now, imagine losing your child in a crowded room of strangers. The drama to find Joshua was now spreading throughout the lobby like ripples in a pond. We had people of all cultures now shouting for Joshua, and the immigration staff were consoling the parents. All of a sudden, there were shouts from the end of queue, saying there was a little Jewish boy running around the vending machine. The Jewish family ran towards the back, forsaking their place in the line and knocking over some of the bollards with the pram. "Joshua," the mother shouted as she saw him. He gave a cheeky smile and started running away. As a child, he had no idea about the heartache and pandemonium he had created for his parents and the immigration staff. "Stop right there," his mother shouted as she sprinted towards him, throwing her smaller child over her shoulder. She then shouted in Hebrew, I think, but I could not be sure, at Joshua, and he simply fell to the ground. To my surprise, he was not crying or afraid, but rolling around laughing, thinking this was some sort of game. He had been captured by his mother, but now the second game began. Joshua now lay in the middle of the queue as hundreds of passengers tried to walk past. He would not get up regardless of the reprimands from his mother. She pulled his hand, but he pulled back and still did not get up. She then said something in a low voice, the anger and frustration deep-seated within her. Joshua's expression changed. The game was over, and he knew he was in trouble. He got up straight away and started crying. The mother hugged him, held his hand tightly, and then joined the queue again. A few passengers who were waiting clapped, happy to see the mother and son reunited. What an ordeal, I thought. Kids are cute and innocent, but they can also be mischievous and restless. When I go to visit families around the world, I sometimes play with their kids and tell the parents how delightful they are. The usual response is, "Thank you, but stay the night and then you will realize how much of a handful they can be." I even have some fathers, who are drained from looking after their children, sometimes joke with me that I am lucky I have taken a vow of celibacy. A man once told me that when he was working out how to raise children, he went through 6 philosophies. However, now that he has 6 children, he has no philosophies left. You may or may not have children. However, I am sure you can relate to the story of Joshua, a mischievous child who is constantly running away, causing anxiety to his poor parents. In life, Joshua can be likened to the unruly, unpredictable, and restless mind. Everyone has a Joshua that they have to manage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are no breaks or timeouts with your own mind. Children are full of energy except when they are sleeping. However, the mind does not sleep. It is constantly on when we are awake. It sometimes stops us from falling asleep, and even when we are asleep, it is wandering in different directions that are beyond our control. It's the subtle organ that never rests, chattering away like a child. If you want to get an honest opinion on how you look, ask a child. They have no filter between their thoughts and their words. Similarly, the mind never stops. It keeps us on our toes and is chattering away, sometimes in our favor and sometimes against us. Just like Joshua, our minds do not remain in one place. When we are working, our mind is thinking about going home and having dinner. When we are at home and trying to relax, the mind is thinking about how much work we have to do. When we are in a serious situation, the mind is thinking of a funny incident. When we are trying to have fun, the mind starts bringing out grave incidents. The inability to control the mind and bind it to stay in one place causes lack of focus. In some people, especially young children, the severe inability to focus the mind has been diagnosed as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. ADHD is a common disorder that affects people's behavior. Those diagnosed with it can seem restless, act on impulses and have trouble concentrating on tasks at hand. One study in Australia calculated that the total cost of ADHD, including healthcare costs, productivity loss in the economy, costs to public services, etc., was estimated to be between $8.4 billion and $17.44 billion USD in 2019. Most people are not diagnosed with ADHD, but recognize the cost of having a chattering, uncontrollable mind that is inattentive. This has effects on both our professional and personal relationships. It can lose us income as well as those we are closest to in our lives. Neen James, a motivational coach based in Florida, USA, in her book Attention Pays: How to Drive Profitability, Productivity, and Accountability, wrote a list of things we feel are helping us focus our mind, but may be doing the opposite. These include believing that connecting with friends and family through social media creates authentic, meaningful connections. Thinking that survival by multitasking is our only option. Trying to be all things to all people. Feeling we must be accessible to everyone all the time. Creating never-ending to-do lists. Trying new fancy planners. Downloading the latest apps. Color-coding our calendars. Reading multiple self-help books about how to get it all done. However, all these actions may be a cover and may not solve the root of the problem that we have a chattering mind that we need to regulate. Just as children are constantly talking to their parents, asking questions, talking to themselves, their dolls, their toys, the mind also has its own monologue. For me, this monologue happens in English within my mind. It's a voice that is on while I am thinking. This is the same voice that tells us to have that extra piece of cake or figures out, later that evening, what we should have said in that earlier argument. It's the voice that fantasizes about us winning that award in the future or lingers on our embarrassing mistakes from the past. It imagines pleasures, creates fears, analyses people, criticizes situations, monitors for danger. It is constantly on, involuntarily. It's the person that we spend the most time with. Therefore, it is critical that we like that voice and make sure we can befriend it to work with us. The Bhagavad Gita, an ancient book on spirituality, spoken over 5,000 years ago by Sri Krishna to Arjuna, is a manual on understanding the mind. In one such verse, 6.26, Sri Krishna speaks about the nature of the mind. Yato niskalati manas kankalam asthiram tatas tato niyamayatad atmani eva vasa? Nayat. The mind wanders due to its restless and unsteady nature, and it is important to bring it back under our control by engaging the higher self. In the same chapter of the Gita, Sri Krishna proclaims, the mind can act as our best friend or worst enemy depending on how we regulate it. There are a few things to learn from these texts. The mind has the nature to be wandering, restless, unsteady, one's greatest enemy if not regulated. Therefore, it is in our best interest to regulate the chattering mind and make it our best friend. If we can focus it and make it steady, we can be successful in our endeavors. We must bring Joshua back at all costs, otherwise there will be chaos. Given a chance, children would just love to play all day, but as a responsible parent, we have to discipline and guide children. We have to create boundaries for them and rules in which they can thrive. Otherwise, they may hurt themselves and even impede their own growth and progress. If Joshua runs away aimlessly or throws a tantrum, we must use the techniques we have in our arsenal to engage him to be constructive and a valuable member of the family. The mind is exactly the same. Regulating the mind is a practice that must be mastered. It takes time to do so, but there are some methods we can employ when the mind goes astray, to prevent it from going astray in the first place. Neglect. I recently saw a video on social media where a father is holding a small child in his arms. The father then proceeds to slam his hand against the door frame and turns to his child and says, "Oh no, are you okay? Are you okay?" The baby looks confused, but then realizes that the action of his father suggests that he is in danger. Instinctively, he starts crying although he is not hurt at all. Toddlers can have a similar reaction when they crave attention from an adult. They may not be in any physical danger, but they simply throw a tantrum to grab the attention of a parent. One method in parenting is to use neglect or ignore the child. Attention for a child can be for positive or negative behaviors. We may praise young children for the good actions they do, giving them positive reinforcement. "Your action is good, therefore, I will give you my attention." In the same way, we may give attention to a child for negative acts they perform. They may be constantly crying for no particular reason or shouting to gain our attention. These actions are bad, but if we respond by telling them to stop, we are still giving the child attention. Parents usually tell me that they find themselves giving the child more negative attention when they are misbehaving. However, the child does not distinguish between negative and positive attention. They still get our focus, which reinforces the action. "Your action is bad, therefore, I will give you my attention." Neglecting or ignoring the child works because it breaks the cycle between bad action and the attention the child receives. The process of ignoring a child sounds reckless and irresponsible, but it is an active process that requires the determination of the parent, who may need to not look at or talk to the child when they are performing behaviors that are harmful for their development. This does not mean we neglect destructive behaviors that can put them in harm's way. These deserve our attention and need to be stopped immediately. Don't ever let your child play with matches. The types of behavior we can ignore are whining, crying, and throwing tantrums when there is nothing obviously wrong. In the same way, we have to learn when to ignore the mind and when to give it attention. This is also an active process that at first requires conscious competence. But over time, as we get used to ignoring the mind's childish requests, it is less of a struggle and becomes unconsciously competent. It may feel odd ignoring the mind, as so much of our being is caught up with what the voice in our head says. However, if we can understand that we are not our mind but something deeper, it becomes easier. We can take our attention away by shifting it to something else. When the mind throws a tantrum, shift it to something enjoyable. We all enjoy doing different things. Try and choose an activity that is enjoyable for you and your mind, example reading a book, watching a movie, writing, etc. Something engaging. Is there something that you want to learn? Is there a creative hobby that you have been putting off? Something energizing. Breath work or conscious breathing can help overcome the chatter of the mind. Note it down. When I am practicing meditation in the mornings, it's a magical time. It is not magical because the chatter in my mind automatically quiets down. It is magical because I consciously choose to put my mind on silent mode. Just as we can turn our phone from loud to silent, there are ways to turn our mind from loud to silent. This means incoming calls are diverted to voicemail and notifications do not ping. Only urgent and important notifications show on our home screen. Similarly, as previously mentioned, we would be foolish to ignore the mind when it is telling us we are in danger. If we are walking and there is an oncoming vehicle, or if we see smoke in the room, ignoring the mind is not a smart thing to do. These are, of course, extreme situations. When we are trying to focus the mind and it brings up an urgent situation, a technique I use when trying to sleep is to have a small notepad and pen next to me to write down things it brings up. This can work for us when we have a lot on our plate that preoccupies our mind. The mind, like any person we meet, wants to be acknowledged. Writing down what it is saying to us is giving it minute attention and is a step forward towards pacifying it. We can then get back to our priority at that moment, be it sleep, work or something else. I go back to this list the morning after and then rank accordingly whether this was an actual urgent call from the mind or simply a cry for attention. Over time, We see patterns in the things we note down on our lists and then can quickly reject those things that we notice are just a tantrum from the mind. This can help us see what the mind is constantly chattering about and then deal with it appropriately. Negotiate. There is a saying, never negotiate with a terrorist. In foreign policy, democracies should never give in to the demands of a militia who is using violence, as it rewards them indirectly for doing so. However, the mind is not a terrorist. It can become our best friend if we discipline it and treat it with the respect it deserves. That is why negotiation is a technique that can be used to quieten the chatter of a demanding mind. Just as parents may negotiate with a child to calm them down, or teachers may negotiate with students to study, we can do the same with the mind. The mind is very focused on the future, chattering away about what could be. However, if we can give it an immediate reward or convince it to focus now, play later, we can gain its cooperation. People who are serious about their fitness do a similar thing. Any fitness trainer can tell us that becoming healthier, example losing excessive weight, is done through maintaining a calorie deficiency by having a strict diet. However, where most people fail is by being too strict on themselves and reverting to eating junk foods. This is to do with regulating the mind. If we can tell the mind, focus on eating healthy foods that you like within your calorie budget for 6 days a week, and then reward it with apparently unhealthy food for 1 day a week, we are more likely to succeed. This is called a cheat day or a cheat meal. This negotiation stops the mind from wanting to indulge, as it knows a meal of luxury is coming soon. However, what it does not realize is that it is becoming habituated to eating healthy foods over time, making us less likely to cheat. It is important not to cheat the mind too much. Once it realizes that we are not keeping our end of the bargain, it may throw a tantrum. The key to negotiating with the mind is remembering the end goal that we want to achieve. There has to be some sort of compromise. Going back to the example of personal training and fitness, if our goal is to lose weight, we have to come to a compromise with the mind that we will have 6 days of focused diet in return for 1 day of eating indulgently. If we are studying, we may have to compromise by watching 1 television show a day that we enjoy in return for hours on end of revision. The key is to make sure the balance is always in favor of our objective and our indulgence does not lead to jeopardizing our objective, i.e., there is no point exercising 6 days a week in return for eating a day of cake. A slice is fine, but a whole day may throw our goals out of the window. Neutral observation. I have a small room in our ashram in Mumbai that is 10 feet by 10 feet. I never had my own space, but over the last few years, as I have become increasingly busy and as my age increases, the management felt it necessary for me and a few others to have our own rooms. My room is situated in a building diagonally behind our temple. From there I can see the people who are entering the temple. One evening, as I was answering emails from my desk, I looked outside the window towards the entrance. There were hundreds of visitors who had come for one of the large events we run each weekend. Many of them were general guests whom I did not know, and they do not know me either. Then there were acquaintances whom I knew by face, who may have waved if they had seen me through the window. Then there were a few close friends who waved, smiled, and I would have called them to come up and spend time with me. But on that day, I didn't. I was just observing. The mind brings up thoughts similar to the visitors to our temple. There are thousands, if not millions, of thoughts that enter our mind daily. There are the general ones, that we need not bother about. There are the necessary ones, that we must address or acknowledge. There are the meaningful ones, these are meant to be carefully cultivated like nurturing a plant. However, the first step for any thought is just being a neutral observer. Monks do not gamble, nor do we encourage it. However, with our thoughts, we all need to spend some time being poker-faced, neutrally looking at our thoughts without playing our hand. Reverting to crying children, something I am not overly familiar with, but it makes for a great analogy regarding the mind. One evening I was meditating on the roof of our ashram. It's a very simple place, modest and secluded, but it overlooks many parts of downtown Mumbai. As I sat there, eyes closed and in a lotus position, I heard a shrieking sound coming from a building opposite. It was some distance away, but the sound was penetrating my eardrums as if it were playing through my headphones on maximum volume. It was a child sobbing uncontrollably. A few monks that were on the rooftop told me that this was a regular affair. Every day, exactly at 10 p.m., the child would cry, just in time to disturb the rest of the weary monks ready to sleep. However, today it was only 9:45, the child was early to the game. My mind's immediate reaction was, why is this child crying? Why is it disturbing me? Why can't the parents control the child? I am so happy I do not have children. These thoughts sound harsh, but note how I started the sentence. These were my mind's immediate reactions, not my reactions. We are not our mind. I then consciously asked myself a question: is this situation so significant that it deserves my reaction? Remember, the mind wants to be the hero and get involved with everything. It wants to analyze, judge and assign meaning to everything that is going on, as it loves to chatter. I decided that the situation was not mine to solve and thus did not deserve my attention and mental space. I decided to ignore the stimulus as well as the immediate reaction from my mind. It was just another sound emanating from the rooftops of Mumbai, just another fact that I could not change, just another thing beyond my control. This conscious decision changed my state of mind, calmed it down and created a distance between me and what was happening around me. There will certainly be times in the day where we need to act on our thoughts and negotiate with them. However, preferably in the morning as we wake up and before we go to bed, there should be a time in the day when we are aloof even from these thoughts. This could be our space of nothingness, just observing our mind. No analysis, no judgments, no reactions. We are human beings, not human doings. We need to take a regular, daily break from the doing and enter the state of being. Scientific literature and spiritual texts align on this point. The more we can master the state of being, the more we can empower our actions when we are doing. Exercise, neutral observer meditation. One way to ease your way into becoming a neutral observer is to practice an observer meditation for 5 minutes daily. Close your eyes. Focus on your breath. Now observe all the thoughts that are coming in. Let the thoughts come in, don't react, don't dwell on them, don't interact with them, simply let them come and go. If you find yourself becoming involved in the thought, consciously bring your mind back to the present moment and to your breath. Let your mind become more and more focused simply on breathing in and out. As you practice this daily, it will slowly become a part of you. This meditation can be done with an object instead of breathing as well. Whenever you find your mind getting involved with thoughts, keep bringing it back to the object and let the thoughts keep passing. These are some suggestions to master the chattering of the mind. We will cover more techniques in a future chapter related to meditation, but remember these 4 principles: neglect, note it down, negotiate and become a neutral observer the next time you hear your mind talking too loudly. Sometimes Joshua's tantrums need to be neglected, yet at other times, we need to negotiate with him and reward him. He may need to be disciplined on certain occasions, yet at others, just observed. One thing to always bear in mind is that Joshua is your own child. He always needs love and care to thrive. I walked through immigration seeing that the Jewish family had also had their passports stamped and were walking through with me. They were all happy and had overlooked the whole situation, ready to start their vacation. The officers and staff chuckled at the incident, but then life in the terminal returned to normal with the general hubbub replacing the commotion. My trip to London was just beginning. Chapter Summary. There are no breaks or timeouts with our own mind. It is constantly on when we are awake, and sometimes stops us from falling asleep. Even when we are asleep, it is wandering in different directions that are beyond our control. It's the subtle organ that never rests, chattering away like a child. It's the person that we spend the most time with. Therefore, it is critical that we like that voice and make sure we can befriend it to work with us. We have to learn when to ignore the mind and when to give it attention. This is also an active process that, at first, requires conscious competence. But over time, as we get used to ignoring the mind's childish requests, it becomes less of a struggle and becomes unconscious competence. When the mind throws a tantrum, shift it to something enjoyable, something engaging, something energizing. Just as we can turn our phone from loud to silent, there are ways to put our mind from loud to silent. The key to negotiating with the mind is remembering the end goal that we want to achieve. There has to be some sort of compromise. There should be a time in the day when we are aloof even from our thoughts. This could be our space of nothingness, just observing our mind. No analysis, no judgments, no reactions. Chapter 4. Jumping at 18,000 feet, Dealing with Anxiety. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step, said Martin Luther King. Heathrow Airport is the fastest for reclaiming your baggage after a long flight. Actually, I think Mumbai might be a little better, but that may be my biased view as a Mumbaikar. I went through immigration, and my bag was waiting for me at the other end. I put it on my trolley, then walked through customs. Two huge airport security guards with rifles, arms covered in tattoos, dressed in uniforms, looked at me suspiciously. Does anyone else become nervous when pushing their luggage through customs even though you have done absolutely nothing wrong? I never have anything to declare. In fact, I do not even have enough possessions to think about if I have anything to declare. I only own a few sets of orange robes, a coat for the bad weather, my laptop, and a few books. Yet, every time I walk through customs I always think, what if someone has slipped something into my bag? What if there are millions of pounds worth of gold in there? What if? My anxiety sometimes gets the better of me. On this occasion, one of the guards approached me and said, "Where have you arrived from?" "India, sir," I mumbled. He looked up and down my robes and I felt as if I was being scolded by his glance. "I am a monk and—" "I know who you are," he interrupted. The other guard joined him. My mind was racing now. Had I done something wrong? Were the gifts of incense I had brought with me now illegal in the UK? Would I be turned away and sent home on the first flight back? In many countries that are less liberal than the UK, I am advised not to dress in saffron like a monk due to security concerns. However, I did not expect this from people in the UK. I gulped, hoping for the best. To my shock, the man smiled. "I know who you are. You are that monk of YouTube. The don't worry monk. It's helped me so much." I burst out laughing, breaking all the tension. I told them they had me petrified for a moment when they stopped me. They apologized for making me worry. The guard was alluding to a YouTube video that went viral many years ago, which encouraged me to take helping people via social media seriously. In this video, I explain in a slide, do you have a problem in life? If not, then why worry? If yes, then can you do something about it? If the next answer is yes, then why worry? Solve your issue. If you cannot do anything and the answer is no, then also why worry? It is such a simple thought but has helped many around the world who recognize me by it. However, I hadn't expected a heavily armed immigration guard to stop me and talk about this video. I spent a few minutes getting acquainted with them, but then they realized they were letting people get through customs without their vigilance. They excused themselves and allowed me to pass through after thanking me for my time and taking a quick selfie. Going through arrivals is like being on a fashion catwalk with so many eyes on you. It can be daunting, but I do enjoy walking to the end, as I get to see the wonderful sight of families being reunited, friends meeting after a long time and people ready to start their well-earned vacations. Picking me up were my friends from the temple, Sriti Dharma Das and Pranabandhu Das. They are like my older brothers and spiritual guides, caring for all my needs in the UK. The sound of laughter always reverberates when we are together. Unfortunately, Sriti Dharma Das passed away in March 2020 from brain cancer, and my heart sinks every time I walk through arrivals at Heathrow knowing that he will never be at the other side of the gate. However, on this occasion, I knew they would both be there. I told them the incident that had occurred with airport security and described my flight, and they both laughed hysterically. They joked that the airport security should have locked me away for complaining about having an emergency exit seat near the toilets. We embraced and walked towards the car. I was exhausted, but so grateful to be in the company of friends. We sped back to Buktivdanta Manor, the local ashram in London where I would be staying. This 80-acre property was donated by George Harrison, one of the Beatles, to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. As we arrived and drove through the gates, a feeling of relief spread through my body. There are only a few places on earth that I consider home. This was one of them. It's the epitome of an English country house, has 70 cows that are hand-milked and many gardens of fragrant flowers. It also has around 50 residents, all working together to live a life of spirituality and share spirituality with others. I was there to be with them all, to try and inspire the monks to be the best monks, to try and inspire families to be the best families, to try and inspire couples to be the best couples, and the thousands of congregation members and volunteers that lived nearby to be the best they could be. My mind was telling me to go and meet those I had not seen in years, but my body was screaming for me to rest. I took my bag up a spiral staircase to a room they had arranged for me, jumped in the shower, and then decided to rest my eyes for an hour. Just as I was approaching the space between being half asleep and deep sleep, there was a knock on the door. "Gaur Gopal ji," I heard from outside. I recognized the voice immediately. I have changed his name to protect his identity, but it was Mr. Malhotra, a well-to-do businessman who had traveled from central London to meet me. The area of London he lived in was the one that people imagine when they think of London, surrounded by historic buildings and a stone's throw away from the River Thames. He bowed down to me, but I immediately resisted as he was my elder, and this custom always embarrasses me. In the spiritual culture I belong to, bowing to an elder or someone with wisdom is a sign of respect. It represents the flow of energy and positive blessings from those who supposedly have wisdom to those who want wisdom. In many parts of India, cheeky teenagers use this custom to get a few rupees from elders as they know that it will please them, and they'll give them some cash. Nevertheless, every cultural action has a deeper spiritual meaning and a significant history. After a few pleasantries with Mr. Malhotra, I offered him a seat and asked how I could help him. I could sense from his body language something was on his mind. He was constantly wiping sweat off his head with a handkerchief and slurring some of his words. I offered him some herbal tea to calm him down. He sipped it after slowly blowing on it. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "This is slightly embarrassing, but I am flying for a family holiday to the Alps by a private jet tomorrow," he said. There were worse problems in the world, I thought to myself. He drank more of his tea, which encouraged him to share more. He cleared his throat. "I usually take medication to put me to sleep, but I no longer want to do so. I have a deep phobia of flying. Several days before the flight, I feel paralyzed and cannot think straight. It affects my relationships and my business. I think, what if the plane takes off, but then does not land?" He shuddered, which validated his concerns. I asked him to take some deep breaths. Flying fills many with deep anxiety. In fact, that is why they call the airport a terminal. You never know whether you'll make it or not. Of course, I did not tell this joke to Mr. Malhotra. The top 3 fears for people have been dying, public speaking, and flying. In the modern age, however, they seem to have changed to your phone running out of battery, poor Wi-Fi connection, and your video still buffering. Mr. Malhotra had a deep fear of flying. It was not something that could be solved overnight and needed a long-term solution. In the short term, I just listened to his anxieties and took him through some meditation and breathing exercises he could do to calm his mind. One of them is as follows. Exercise, guided affirmation. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in for a count of 4 seconds. Hold for a count of 2 seconds. Then breathe out for a count of 6 seconds. Each time you breathe in, say to yourself, I am not alone, the universe is with me, I can deal with whatever it is that I am going through. You can be more specific about the situation that you are dealing with. Each time you breathe out, say to yourself, I let go of my negative feelings. I let go of my anxiety. I feel peaceful. I feel empowered. Repeat this exercise 10 times. Now slowly open your eyes. It is normal to feel anxious at different points in our life. This can be a perfectly natural emotion to life events such as sitting for an exam, getting married, or going for a job interview. However, many people find it hard to control their anxiety. For them, these feelings of worry are more constant, making everyday activities difficult as they are marred by the underlying anxiety they feel all the time. Imagine walking around with a ringing in your ears. You would not tolerate it and would want to get rid of it. That is how people suffering with anxiety disorders feel. They have a ringing of anxiety with every action, and some people experience it worse than others. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illnesses in the world, and they affect approximately a third of adults at some point in their lives. One, anxiety itself is a specific symptom of these conditions, but the most common is generalized anxiety disorder. I am not a medical doctor, but I have counseled numerous people who suffer from this disorder and many who may have not been diagnosed formally but cannot rid themselves of constant anxiety. Symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder include feeling restless or worried, having trouble focusing or sleeping, and even dizziness or heart palpitations. Scientific literature shows that many factors can cause anxiety. Genetics seem to play a part, with people being 5 times more likely to suffer from generalized anxiety disorder if a family member suffers from it too. Chemical imbalances in the brain with, for example, serotonin or noradrenaline, which regulate your mood, or overactivity of some areas of the brain also seem to spike anxiety in many people. Chronic illnesses, such as arthritis or fatigue, or stressful incidents, such as losing a loved one or domestic violence, are other causes. Furthermore, drinking alcohol and smoking have been linked to heightened anxiety. The cessation of both improved symptoms for many. There are many medicines and psychological therapies that your local doctor can prescribe, but they are beyond the scope of this book. I highly recommend that you visit a medical professional if you have been suffering from an anxiety disorder for a long period of time. We will talk more about this later in the chapter. Additionally, practices like meditation are some things that you can do yourself to help you with anxiety. Dealing with anxiety. Rational reasoning. In this book so far, I know that I have spoken about planes, airports, and flying, above and beyond the quota for any book. However, I have to tell you a story about an adventure I once had. It was one in which I got onto a plane that took off with me in it but landed with me outside of it. Let me tell you about the time I went skydiving. The night before I was due to make the plunge, I was lying in bed visualizing myself jumping out of the plane. At first I thought, I cannot wait, it's going to be an incredible experience. But then, as the night went by, I started to toss and turn. What if the parachute does not open? What if it opens but malfunctions when we are in the air? What if a group of birds collides with me? What if I simply free fall to the ground? There were hundreds of these statements swirling around in my mind, chattering away and keeping me awake. Do you know what all of these statements have in common? They may be fears and cause us anxiety, but they start with the same 2 words, what if? These 2 words govern most of our lives, causing us anxiety and crippling us with inaction. What if I fail? What if we lose? What if people mock me? What if they say no? This what if stops us from reaching our full potential. It is not always possible to confront your what if with rational reasoning. Many times, when we're anxious and approach a friend, they tell us to calm down. However, telling someone to calm down rarely works and in some cases, can make them even more agitated. I decided to give rational reasoning a go for myself, to myself. You can try this too for your own anxiety. The first thing I did was figure out if I wanted to experience skydiving. I deliberated and worked out that I was scared, but a resounding yes also came from within. Then I told my mind, I understand that there are many what ifs to the scenario, but whatever happens, I will be ready. Once I gained some courage, I decided to employ my intelligence to try and calm my mind further. I made sure that I was not taking an uncalculated risk by checking the risk factors involved. Skydiving is a popular sport in the US, and in 2020, participants made approximately 2.8 million jumps at more than 200 United States Parachute Association, USPA, affiliated skydiving centers across the country. In 2020, USPA recorded 11 fatal skydiving accidents, a rate of 0.39 fatalities per 1,00,000 jumps. This is comparable to 2019, where participants made more jumps 3.3 million and USPA recorded 15 fatalities, a rate of 0.45 per 100,000. To put this into context, there were less deaths in jumping out of a plane than car accidents on the road. I tried to convince my mind in this way, but it protested, what if I happened to be one among the 11? The next stage was working out why I wanted to have this experience. Then stay in the hotel room like a couch potato, missing the most exhilarating experience of your life, I retorted to my mind. I then consoled it by saying, look, your skydiving experience is not going to be all by yourself. You will be strapped to an expert who has done thousands of dives before and has not had a single casualty, obviously. Take it easy. My mind began to understand the rationale but needed me to repeat this multiple times so it was reinforced. The thoughts that we repeat not only are likely to become our action but also our emotions. If we can repeat our reasoning rationales, we are more likely to calm the chattering mind. Before I drifted off to sleep, I asked my mind, why are you anxious? My mind replied, I am not actually anxious or nervous, I am excited. Anxiety reappraisal. The reason why telling people to calm down does not work when they are nervous or anxious about a situation is because it is going against the grain of what our emotions want to do. Instead of trying to suppress the feeling or calm down, we should try and express this feeling as excitement. Of course, this is not a solution for generalized anxiety disorder, but it can help us in specific situations where we feel anxious, such as before an exam, a social occasion, or even skydiving. This conversation of emotions was coined anxiety reappraisal by Harvard Business School psychologist Alison Wood Brooks. She conducted an experiment in which she made a group of people do the exact same terrifying tasks. Some were doing public speaking, others were doing math problems, and the rest singing their hearts out on karaoke. The results were astounding. In every task, the group that was taught to reframe their emotions of apprehension to enthusiasm had a better performance. 3. The interesting thing is that the switch from nervousness to excitement is not a physiological one. It's not our body changing, it's our mindset changing. All the participants of Alison Brooks's study, regardless of whether they were in the control group or the group told to shift their mindset, had increased heartbeats and released the chemical cortisol, a chemical that surges when you are preparing for action. Both groups were experiencing a high arousal state, which is one of the reasons it is better to change our mindset from nervous to excited, than to try and calm down, which is a low arousal state. Although being anxious and being excited have the same physiological symptoms, the mindset differs. They both imply an uncertain future, but anxiety suggests the future should be feared, while excitement suggests it should be looked forward to. It's a state of mind that needs to be practiced by reasoning with your mind the next time you have a situation that fills you with dread. I am not anxious, I am excited. This is an opportunity, not a threat. If rational reasoning does not work and the what-ifs get the better of us, there are other simple physiological things we can do that could help, namely, exercise and stopping smoking and drinking alcohol. Exercise. Every time I tell people that exercise can help them with their anxiety, they reply that they cannot afford a personal trainer or do not have time to go to the gym. Exercise is now synonymous with lifting weights or going for long arduous runs. However, for me, exercise is getting the body moving. Getting the body moving every day releases feel-good endorphins that enhance our sense of well-being. It can simultaneously take our mind off our worries, breaking the cycle of negative thoughts that cause us to feel anxious. It is not just anxiety disorders that exercise helps with, other mental health conditions such as depression are positively affected by staying fit. As mentioned above, exercise could be any form of movement. The ancient science of well-being suggests that going for a walk in nature daily helps us process our emotions. With every step on the ground, our anxiety reduces. Exercise is also known to help us gain confidence by making us feel and look fit, gives us an opportunity to socialize with others by playing sports and developing relationships, and also reinforces a positive coping mechanism for us. Stopping smoking and drinking alcohol. Many people who smoke or chew tobacco do so because they believe that it reduces stress, but scientific studies have found that this does the opposite. Cigarettes contain an extremely addictive substance called nicotine, which, at first, can improve our mood and give us a sensation of relaxation. However, over time, regular doses of nicotine can lead to changes in the brain that cause withdrawal symptoms when the supply of nicotine decreases. Although at first, smoking can give the sensation of reducing stress, over time it increases anxiety. Science has disproved the claim that smoking gets rid of our tension. This feeling is temporary and soon caves into symptoms based on our craving. These include anxiety, stress, and in some cases, paranoia. The story is similar with alcohol but even easier to understand. Alcohol is a depressant. It lowers the level of a hormone called serotonin, which is largely responsible for the feeling of happiness. The less serotonin we produce, the more anxiety we are likely to feel. Just like smoking cigarettes, our brain builds up tolerance to the relaxing sensations it produces, making it less effective and more likely to destabilize our emotions. Studies show that 20% of those with social anxiety have an alcohol abuse problem and that alcohol can disrupt our sleep pattern, which in turn can trigger our anxiety. As a monk, I do not smoke or drink alcohol. However, I do not ever judge those who do. It is extremely addictive and somewhat commonplace in our society. Nevertheless, science does show that if we can take the first steps to stopping smoking and reducing our alcohol intake, we can lead lives of reduced stress. Beyond rational reasoning and simple physiological acts to help us reduce our anxiety is seeking help. We can only reason to a point, something I found with Mr. Malhotra in regard to his fear of flying. If anxiety takes over, finding someone we trust to speak to about it is always a safe option. Seeking help. Big boys do not cry is the philosophy that still permeates our society, despite the considerable movement to become aware of and eradicate mental health problems. When I was growing up, asking for help or being vulnerable was seen as a sign of weakness. It was seen as a sign that you could not cope or solve your own problems. I am now a huge advocate of changing this culture completely. Big boys should cry, and in order for big boys to cry, they have to be taught that it's fine to cry as small boys. It should be commonplace to seek help when we are struggling with our mental health. I want to share a personal story with you. When I joined the ashram, all I had was 3 sets of robes and a small wooden locker. Each monk had one and they were all next to each other lining the corridor of the ashram on the first floor. Although each locker was exactly the same, the insides would be different as each monk decorated it accordingly to his personality. Some had their own personal altars of prayers, others stuck pictures of the divine, and some had personal libraries of as many ancient books as they could fit on one shelf. It's a minimalistic lifestyle, but we're happy, as we know less is often more. The ashram is separate from the rest of the temple, but the lockers are situated on a veranda, meaning that in the monsoon, water flows off the roof of the veranda and to the ground below. Although it gets humid, sitting on top of a locker and talking to other monks can be peaceful while the rain falls. Adjacent to our corridor of lockers is a private meeting room for the monks, which in turn is adjacent to the large communal temple hall where hundreds meet weekly to pray, meditate, and sing together in front of Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, Murthis or deities in the temple and the focus of our devotion. Many Mumbai monsoons ago, only a few years after I joined the ashram, Paresh, a young boy of 19 years, came to stay with us. He wanted to experience the lifestyle of a monk during his summer holidays, before he went away to study abroad. We have many such requests by those who want to see how we live and gain a spiritual foundation before they move on in life. Paresh was around 5'6", slightly chubby around the waist, sweet, funny, and eager to serve. It can be intimidating talking to monks at times, but Paresh was confident and always made us laugh. We could sense that he was having the time of his life living and serving at the temple. One evening I sat on the floor by my locker, meditating deeply while hearing the pitter-patter of the rain against the tiled ground floor. It was the second evening of the monsoon. As I tried to focus, all of a sudden, I heard a thumping sound behind me. Paresh had fallen to the ground and was having a seizure. He was shaking uncontrollably. I jumped to my feet, shouted for help and approached Paresh, whose limbs were vigorously shaking and his eyes rolling back. I had never seen anything like this and did not know what to do. Should I hold him down? Should I call an ambulance? Should I run to call another monk? No other monk was in sight. The monsoon clouds created a dark shadow across the ashram and the sound of rain was now an ominous soundtrack. I fell to my knees next to Paresh in a state of panic as I felt paralyzed by my inaction. Paresh, Paresh! I screamed. What's going on? At that moment, another monk who was a medical doctor came and, in a flash, performed a procedure to calm Paresh down. After a few moments, this young boy came back to consciousness slightly dazed and tired, but aware of his surroundings. Are you okay? I asked. What was that? He confirmed that he gets momentary blackouts and seizures. Doctors have performed tests on him but do not know why he gets them or when they are likely to happen. I was shocked while he was telling me this. I had no idea what to do and how to behave. As more monks approached the scene, I backed away and returned to the temple hall, thankful that Paresh was alive and well. That night, as I lay in my sleeping bag covered by the mosquito net, I was having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, the episode of Paresh having a seizure kept flashing in my mind. I tried to reason with myself that he was fine now and under the care of doctors for his condition. But the what-if syndrome had got me. What if he was not fine and it was because I had frozen and did not know what to do to help him? If this could happen to him, what if it happened to me? The next day, I tried to brush off this feeling by keeping myself busy with my daily responsibilities, but it was to no avail. Busying ourselves with work, even if it is charity or spiritual work, will not cover up our deep, underlying emotional needs. In fact, the busier I got and the more I saw Paresh, the more I started developing a fear of this unknown disease. Just as the dark monsoon clouds covered the scene of Paresh having a seizure while I looked on, a shadow of anxiety covered my mind. It started affecting my daily activities and my quality of sleep. Reasoning did not help in this situation as the intensity of my fears was much larger than the strength of my reasoning. In this situation, the mind takes over and leaves intelligence and logic to mull in the background. Leo Aikman said, "Blessed is the man who is too busy to worry in the daytime and too sleepy to worry at night." But in my case, being busy did not solve the problem. Distracting ourselves can give us relief for some time, but it usually does not heal us. As a young monk, I also believed that intensifying my spiritual practice, meditating harder, praying harder, chanting harder would help. To my disbelief, none of it helped. Even in the name of spirituality, we can distract ourselves from our emotional needs. The purpose of our spiritual practices is not to specifically restore our emotional well-being and solve our anxieties, although they have that side effect in general. Yes, meditation can help with our stress, but if the cause of our stress is another identifiable problem, we must deal with the problem and not mask it in the name of protecting our spiritual credibility. We must not bury our heads in the sand. We must not ignore the signs that indicate we are struggling with our mental health by covering them up with our spiritual practices. Spiritual practices are meant to awaken our deeper self. They are not there to deal with our physical or mental ailments, although they may have that after effect and can complement our healing. An easier way to understand this is to consider the precautions we take when we are physically ill. If we fell over and broke our leg, would we pray to God for it to be fixed, or would we visit a doctor? We would use our God-given intelligence to visit a doctor to place us in a cast and the body. This concept will be clarified in section 4. We should deal with our mental health just as we would deal with a fever, either take prescribed medication that will help our symptoms or seek help from a therapist. My lack of sleep was significantly affecting my daily work. I could not help but think of Paresh's situation. As I write this, I think, why couldn't I just get over it? However, reverting to my previous analogy for someone who has broken their leg, you cannot tell them to simply get over it. There is a way of dealing with such issues. The common responses are fright, flight, or fight. Many allow their mental health issues to linger through fright. They keep their problem switch on in the background, just as a medical clinic reception keeps the radio playing. You know it's there, but you are not quite listening. This can lead to paranoia and worsening of symptoms over time. Another group of people may decide to forcefully try and switch their problem off. They use flight to run away from their problem, turning to things like denial or being constantly busy to make their issues feel insignificant. The final group try to fight the problem. They do what they can to deal with their challenges but go about it in an unstructured manner. Fighting is great, it shows motivation and willingness to overcome the issue. But it needs structure and strategy. A boxer learns everything about their opponent and fights with a cool head. They employ structure when trying to win. We must do the same with our mental health. We have all heard that the first step is always accepting we have a problem. Just as the first step for an alcoholic in the Alcoholics Anonymous program is letting go and admitting they have a problem, the first step in dealing with our anxiety is admitting that we have or might have a problem. By admitting that we are powerless, even for a split second, we allow humility to settle in. It's the feeling of humility that allows us to seek the help we need. If we are anxious about something and we feel we might need help, we can take a moment to say out loud, I am anxious about my problem. I have been anxious about my problem for a certain number of days or months or years. I want to face this anxiety and get rid of it, however, I think I need help to do so. The first person I went to was my locker mate, Govinda Das. He was one of the first monks to join the ashram in Mumbai and I knew his wisdom was vast. I saw him every morning and greeted him, but I could not quite muster up the courage to tell him how I was feeling. It was hard to share my weakness. After all, I am a monk. Was I not supposed to be above all this and be the enlightened one guiding others? I was also ashamed. What if other monks found out and would judge me? After a few days, I realized that these monks were my most trusted confidants. Monks are human too, and I am sure everyone goes through their challenges. The human mind is like our software. It can malfunction regardless of what the outer shell of gender, religion, nationality, or socio-economic status is made up of. I needed help, I admitted it and decided to meet Govinda Das privately. As a side note, I always recommend meeting those you trust privately and not advertising your problems to the whole world. That can be overwhelming and unproductive in helping you with your anxiety. Govinda Das is a grave person. He's strict on himself, but lenient with others. What this means is that he has the determination of a lion, but the heart of a Bengali mother. As I sat with him on the veranda of our ashram drinking hot tea, I told him how I was struggling. I spoke with my head down looking to the floor. At first, he laughed. It was not a laugh at me, but a laugh that he knew what to do. A laugh with me. Many times, we are so engrossed in our own problems that we are unable to take a step back and see the solutions open to us. I finished explaining my problem fully. He paused, said some empathetic words, put his arm around my shoulders and then gave me examples of people who he had helped through similar fears. He helped me see that there was nothing I could have done to help Paresh further and that what happened to him was unlikely to happen to me. What he said next shocked me: go and see a psychiatrist too. He told me that sleepless nights and paranoia may also need to be handled with the help of a professional. A psychiatrist. I thought. I don't think my problem is that bad. I'm fine. It's just a little thing that is bothering me. I don't need to see a psychiatrist. For the readers of this book, were you also shocked at this suggestion? How can a monk see a psychiatrist? Seeing a psychiatrist is taboo in many countries, but we need to work to change that. This is not only the case in India, but around the world. The stigma originates from the way mental health professionals used to treat patients and conjures up images of being in an asylum. It is especially taboo for men to seek help as they, because of societal expectations to be the breadwinners and strong, bury their mental struggles away. Stereotypes about gender can leave men damaged as they fail to live up to the dominant, in control, strong personalities that our culture portrays they should have. It is no wonder that in the UK, 75% of those who commit suicide are men. For I admit that I also had this perception that seeing a psychiatrist is for the weak, but this could not be further from the truth. We go to a doctor for our physical ailments, we should also feel comfortable going to a doctor for our mental ailments. I trusted Govinda Das's advice, although it was hard to digest at the time. I have never gone through anything like this or dreamed I would ever need professional help for my mind. This was not a huge issue, but it was consistently nagging at me. If you hold a barbell out in front of you for a moment, it won't bother you. But if you hold the same barbell out in front of you for an hour, it will cause significant strain. Regardless of the weight, it is how long we are carrying it that can cause injury. Govinda Das suggested that I should go and see Dr. Patel. There were many Dr. Patels in our community, but I knew exactly which one he was talking about. This Dr. Patel had been a member of our spiritual community for many years and had been training with a renowned senior for the last 3 years since he passed medical school. Dr. Patel was incredibly bright and accomplished in his own right. But there was a catch. I had been giving lectures, a weekly talk on spirituality, motivation and the mind, at Dr. Patel's medical school for the past 6 years when he was there too. He always came to listen and greeted me affectionately at the end. I had even done significant discourses on dealing with the mind. How would it look for me now to approach him with my issues? Was this not a self-defeating action? I returned to the first lesson we learn as monks, humility. In fact, we pray for humility daily in our prayers, Trinad Api Suni Sina. We should have a humble state of mind so that we can perfect our meditative state. Just as a blade of grass gets stepped on and bounces back, we should be humble enough to bow down so that we can gain wisdom. My prayers were definitely working as approaching Dr. Patel, my former student, would humble me. However, it was a good thing and an irrational hang-up. Just because someone teaches medicine in a medical school does not mean they cannot get ill. Just because someone is a mechanic does not mean that their car will not break down. Just because someone is a dentist does not mean their teeth will not decay. Just because someone is a monk does not mean that they will not succumb to issues of the mind and stress. The sooner we address our issues, the better it is for us as we can get back to living a normal, stable, and fulfilling life. At that moment, with Govinda Das, I decided to call Dr. Patel. Without a hint of superiority, he understood my problem and I asked if I could see him in his clinic the next day. He said that he was fully booked but offered to come to the ashram to spend time with me personally. Another humbling situation. At his clinic, no one knew who I was, but in the ashram, everyone knew who I was and would see that I was speaking with a practicing psychiatrist. I snapped myself out of these thoughts. If I met a dentist in the ashram, would people jump to the conclusion that I had a toothache? Although we may introduce ourselves by our professions, humans are more than their careers. Regardless of what people thought, I knew it was important for me to see him. At times, we live our life based on what others think of us rather than how life should be lived. The next morning, after our morning meditations, Dr. Patel and I sat on the same ashram veranda where I had met Govinda Das a day before. At first, I unconsciously put up a front that everything was fine, but he was used to patients doing that. Through his communication skills, he allowed me to be vulnerable and tell him Paresh's story. I had to wipe the dust off the mirror or remove the filter from my post and show him what I was struggling with in its clean, unedited format. After hearing my story, Dr. Patel said that I had been under stress, but there was no serious issue. This too would pass if I were to face my problems head-on. He had said similar things to what Govinda Das had said, but coming from a trained professional, it made me peaceful. After a few days, my anxieties about the subject started to dissipate. The processing of opening up to Govinda Das and Dr. Patel was needed for me to move on. Relief. Opening up about our problems can help us feel lighter and give us a sense of relief. If our problem is a huge box that we are carrying, opening up to someone we trust would represent them helping us carry the other side of the box. Many hands make light work. The key is that they need to know A, how to carry the box safely, be competent in listening and giving advice, and B, be trusted to carry the box, be a trusted friend who is non-biased and non-judgmental so as to not embarrass us about opening up. We often carry so much weight on our own. This can make us feel isolated and lonely over time, harming our inner peace and joy. There is an ancient story of the jackal and the hunter that depicts this mental weight well. Once a hunter decided to cross into illegal grounds to hunt a jackal. He wanted to prove to his friends that he could catch the largest jackal of the pack. In desperation, he had crossed into a forest that was governed by another kingdom. As he walked through, he noticed the jackal in the moonlight, drinking water majestically from a stream. The hunter slowly took out his rifle, aimed at the jackal and fired. "Who goes there?" the hunter immediately heard from the other side of the trees. It was a local officer patrolling the area. "Drop your weapon and show yourself," the officer shouted. The hunter immediately ran to the jackal, knowing that if the officer found it with his bullet, he would be prosecuted. He stuffed the jackal into his large coat as the officer approached. "Who are you?" the officer demanded. "I am a local hunter." "Sorry, I am lost." Ouch. The jackal was still alive. However, instead of telling the officer what he had done, he kept hiding the jackal inside his coat and allowed it to bite him multiple times. This analogical story represents mental health. The jackal is our anxiety, and the coat is our external appearance. Hiding our anxiety without dealing with it only causes pain. Letting the jackal out of our coats and admitting that we have a problem brings relief from suffering. In real life, there is no angry police officer judging us about our problems, but a trusted friend or professional helping us. Support. Not only do we feel lighter by opening up, but we also get the support we need. This happens from three types of people. Guides and friends, these are trusted confidants who we can share our hearts with. They can help us only to the capacity they understand the problem themselves and advise us accordingly. In many cases, we already know the reason for our anxiety. We simply need someone to bounce the problem off, diminishing our uncomfortable feelings of shame and guilt. Experts, if our friends cannot help us, we should talk to a professional. It helped me, and depending on your problem, Speaking to a medical professional can help you see things from a different perspective, and see them rationally. In some cases, the medical expert may find it apt to prescribe medication to help us. Universe, in sharing our inner issues and seeking help, we gain the help of an additional power. When we humble ourselves and admit that we need help, our focus changes to finding the solution to our anxiety. This allows universal powers to flow through us and inspire us to succeed. Exercise, reflection on anxiety. Reflect on what makes you anxious. Is there a pattern that triggers you to feel anxious? If so, what is it? Think about the last few times you felt anxious. What helped you feel less anxious and why did that help? Try and identify a pattern of things that has helped you deal with anxiety. Mr. Malhotra felt happier after hearing that I had once gone to see a psychiatrist. He had already felt better with the breathing exercise we did, but now even more so after opening up to me and discussing the issue deeply. I encouraged him to seek help for his phobia while simultaneously trying what he could do himself to solve the issue. I told him that certain fears and anxieties come from imagined problems, but others come from real issues that take a deeper insight and longer time to solve. It's important for us to tell the difference. As I said goodbye to Mr. Malhotra, I decided the next port of call for me would be to shake off my jet lag and rest. It was going to be a busy tour of the UK, meeting fascinating people who all have their own individual stories and struggles. Chapter Summary. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illnesses in the world. The thoughts that we repeat not only are likely to become our actions, but also our emotions. If we can repeat our reasoning rationales, we are more likely to calm the chattering mind. Instead of trying to suppress our feelings or calm down, studies show that we should try and express those feelings as excitement. If rational reasoning does not work and the what-ifs get the better of us, there are other simple physiological things we can do to help ourselves, namely, exercise and stopping smoking and drinking alcohol. It should be commonplace to seek help when we are struggling with our mental health. Making ourselves busy with work, even if it is charity or spiritual work, will not cover up our deep, underlying emotional needs. Spiritual practices are meant to awaken our deeper self. They are not there to deal with our physical or mental ailments, although they may have that after effect and can complement our healing. The first step is always accepting that we have a problem. I always recommend meeting those we trust privately and not advertising our problems to the whole world. That can be overwhelming and unproductive in helping us deal with our anxiety. Regardless of the weight, it is how long we are carrying it that can cause injury. Hiding our anxiety without dealing with it only causes pain. Chapter 5. The Bird's Nest, Dealing with Depression. Mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but it is more common and also more hard to bear. The frequent attempt to conceal mental pain increases the burden. It is easier to say, "My tooth is aching," than to say, "My heart is broken," said C.S. Lewis. The heat in London is different from the heat in Mumbai. When it gets hot in London, there is a dryness to it, and it does feel as if the sun is penetrating your skin. Mumbai, on the other hand, is humid. There is a dampness to the heat that makes it difficult to sleep, especially in the ashram where we have a range of monks all preferring different climates. When I joined the ashram in Mumbai, we did not have air conditioning in the temple hall. This hall is around 25 by 10 meters, and because of the sheer number of monks we have, around 30 of them have to sleep in this hall at night. There is simply no space in the ashram. On one hand, we would prefer they have their own space and that they don't have to sleep in the temple hall, but on the other, it's great for those who find it difficult to wake up in the morning, as the murmur of chanting monks who come to the hallway before the time it opens for worship raises them from their slumber. To suit the range of climates preferred, we had two zones in the temple. The left side was the fanatic zone, and the right was the non-fanatic zone. In the past we did not have air conditioning, we only had overhead swirling fans that threw the air down on those below. There were monks who enjoyed sleeping under them, the fanatics, and those that did not, the non-fanatics. Personally, I was a hardcore fanatic, needing the cool breeze of a fan to get me to sleep. One night as we were all sleeping, under our pop-up mosquito nets that make the temple hall look like a mini-city, one of the monks sleeping in the fanatic zone woke up. He unzipped his mosquito net and jumped out of it. He crept around the other tents like a burglar snooping around a house. "What's happening?" I whispered to him, half asleep. It was 2 in the morning. "I think I see something," he said, startled to see me awake. Like a gazelle running away from the pounce of a lioness, the monk ran to the light switches, turned them on and shouted, "Snake! Snake in the temple hall!" All the monks jumped out of their own mosquito nets, many of them tearing their sleeping bags in the commotion. Many simply lay there shouting polite abuse back at him that it was not time to wake up yet and to switch off the lights. Others were fast asleep, not even an earthquake could wake them up. I got up immediately, alarmed at the fact that there could be a venomous serpent among our city of tents. What if it bit someone? I went to the monk who was approaching a slithering creature. It moved away from us, almost floating on the temple floor. All of a sudden, another monk slapped him on the side of his head. "That's a child's balloon," he exclaimed. It was a long black balloon, the likes of which are tied into various animal shapes at parties. It had been floating around the floor due to the fans. Some monks laughed, others hurled more polite abuse at him, and some missed the whole thing still being fast asleep. Relieved, we turned the lights off and went back to sleep. As we woke up at 4 a.m., he was extremely embarrassed and could not avoid the mockery of his close friends about the incident for the next few weeks. When the lights are off, our imagination turns simple things into monsters. The pile of clothes on our chair, our jacket hanging on the door, or a balloon being blown by the wind. They can all seem like creatures from the underworld. It is only when the lights are turned on that our fears are dispelled. In the same way, our imagination can make reality out of the darkness of illusion. It can create problems that are not true. It is only when we turn the lights on, face our fears, anxieties, and insecurities, or seek help from those we trust, that we really see if there is a monster there or a winter coat. This is an analogy for the difference between short-term issues of the mind that can be solved relatively quickly, like my episode with Paresh, and long-term issues that plague the mind, such as depression. The first steps are to switch the lights on to see what you are dealing with. Exercise, reflection on the mind's ability to trick us. Recall any incidents where you initially felt as though you were in danger but later realized that there was nothing to worry about. Reminding ourselves of these events will train the mind to remain calm in stressful situations. The United Kingdom is known for its universities. Oxford, Cambridge, and the London School of Economics are all notable higher education institutions training some of the brightest minds in the world. I had the opportunity to speak at University College London on my trip this time round, addressing over 100 students on controlling the mind to get rid of stress. The auditorium was circular with red cushioned seats and large glass-paned windows looking onto the outside world. I was addressing a group of medical students and healthcare professionals on a topic entitled, "Physician Heal Thyself." Nearly everyone had a notepad and pen resting on the old wooden tables in front of them. This was an older, musty lecture theater modernized by the insertion of 2 projectors beaming my presentation onto the screens above. I have always enjoyed speaking to young people. Their minds are still fresh and malleable like young bamboo. Bamboo, much like our opinions, is flexible when it is young, but as it ages, it becomes tough and rigid. This particular group was full of energy, listening to my every word, looking for inspiration, but at the same time, also looking for the logic to what I was saying. They were not awed by my saffron robes like students in India were. Many in the audience were looking to catch a man of the cloth out in what he was saying. Young people still have the confidence to challenge a proposition until it is either defeated or understood. But once they do understand it, they have the energy to transform it into action, becoming catalysts of change to form a legacy for a brighter world. I started by explaining to the audience the fact that unless we are in a good place physically, mentally, and spiritually, we cannot be good healers. As I was speaking, an uninvited guest entered the lecture hall. It flapped its gray wings and flew to the top of the room. A pigeon with a straw in its beak startled a few members of the audience. I guess it was making a nest to lay its eggs in a corner of the old room. It was the perfect place to build a nest, as no predator would think about entering a room full of 100 healthcare professionals. I was taken aback by our new friend entering the room, but after a moment, the students focused again as if nothing had happened. I guess they were used to the pigeon entering but wary of protecting their clothes, bags, and notebooks from what it may drop on them. Inspired by what I just saw, I changed the direction of my presentation slightly. I asked the 100-odd members of the audience, how many of you live in a home? Puzzled by this rhetorical question, everyone nervously raised their hands. I continued, on any given day, how many of you count the pigeons flying above your homes? Pigeons are as abundant in London as they are in India. In fact, many people make a living selling bird feed at Trafalgar Square to feed the flock of pigeons who linger around Nelson's column. No one raised their hands to my second question. I went on to tell them of an ancient Indian anecdote regarding Emperor Akbar and his minister Birbal. One day Emperor Akbar and Birbal were taking a walk in the palace gardens. It was a nice summer morning and there were plenty of crows happily playing around the pond. While watching the crows, a question came into Akbar's head. He wondered how many crows there were in his kingdom. Since Birbal was accompanying him, he asked Birbal this question. After a moment's thought, Birbal replied, "There are 95,463 crows in the kingdom." Amazed by his quick response, Akbar tried to test him again. "What if there are more crows than you answered?" Without hesitating, Birbal replied, "If there are more crows than my answer, then some crows are visiting from other neighboring kingdoms." "And what if there are less crows?" Akbar asked. "Then some crows from our kingdom have gone on holiday to other places. None of us keeps account of the birds that are flying above the roof of our homes, but when one enters and tries to make a nest, we will notice it. In our house, they may be noisy, they may lay eggs, they make a mess. Our emotions are similar. We may have positive ones and negative ones throughout the day, but we have to let them pass just as we let the birds above our house move freely. However, when a negative emotion makes a permanent residence within our minds and starts affecting our well-being, we should address it." At that moment, the pigeon started cooing in its monotonous way and the auditorium laughed. I gave them another analogy to cement the point, which they could connect to even better as healthcare professionals. "How do we know we are ill?" I asked the audience. A young lady at the front wearing a lab coat stood up and said, "When the body displays symptoms, sir." I nodded. "But can we actually see the cause of what is causing our illness? Can we see the virus or bacteria with the naked eye?" The audience shook their heads. Our bodies generate symptoms to try and fight the infection and tell us that something is wrong. Without these symptoms of pain or fever, we would not be able to seek proper treatment. I paused for a moment, making sure that I was going in the right direction with these doctors. There are simple viral fevers that are cured with rest and plenty of fluids. Yet, there are others: malaria, typhoid, pneumonia. These diseases need extensive treatment from modern medicine at times, or they could be fatal, I continued. I went on to explain that our mental health also produces symptoms of unease, but they are harder to spot. Many behavioral patterns are simply symptoms of an underlying emotional turmoil that needs to be addressed. Symptoms like gloom, a clouded mind, heaviness, fatigue, irritability, mood swings, lack of interest, withdrawal from our work or people, the feeling of meaninglessness, among many others, could be underlying signs of anxiety and depression. But they have an underlying cause that needs to be addressed. Just as a thermometer is used to check our temperature and a blood test is used to assess the markers of infection, we need to seek help and be assessed when we are struggling with our mind. Exercise, Addressing negative emotions. How will you address your negative emotions so that they do not turn into a nest? Write an action plan. For example, the next time I feel a negative emotion, I am going to consciously take some time out to. This way, I can try and address the emotion before it lingers and creates a long-term negative effect. Remember, this needs to be done as soon as you first identify the negative feeling. Sadness and depression. Studies suggest that over 40% of us will suffer from depression in our lives. That means every other person you meet in the street will go through this disease. However, depression is poorly understood. Many people mistake depression for sadness and sadness for depression because they share many similarities. In both, people feel lost, complain of alienation from their normal lives and cry. However, the difference is that the person who is sad has a specific reason for their sadness, whereas the depressed person may not. It's easy for the sad person to tell you what is bothering them, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job or the breaking of a relationship. The depressed person is just depressed, they can't pinpoint what is causing their hopelessness. Because of this lack of clarity on why someone is feeling depressed, it is common to prescribe medication to lift such patients out of their state of despair. The pharmaceutical industry, and rightly so in many cases, writes that depression is due to a change in brain chemistry that needs to be corrected with cost-effective medication. The lack of a clear psychological cause of depression can also frustrate the friends and family of those who suffer from depression. These people may offer solutions that are unpalatable, or may accuse them of not trying to get better or even exaggerating their symptoms. There is another solution to depression which has a growing evidence: psychotherapy or talk therapy. Psychotherapy aims to help people understand their feelings and gives them solutions to help them face their challenges. Although it sounds similar to counseling, psychotherapists believe that there are deeper traumas that are banished to our subconscious governing our moods, actions, and state of well-being. Therefore, they believe that depression does have a deeper cause that needs to be explored by talking to a psychotherapist. It is believed that the reason depression and sadness are closely linked is that depression is sadness where the cause has been unconsciously forgotten to protect you from overwhelming feelings of loss and pain. Talk therapy can help with depression, low self-esteem, bereavement, addiction, and other severe mental health conditions. Why might someone then be depressed? What could they be unconsciously trying to block out? It could be trauma from their childhood, the lack of care from a parent, trauma from their relationships, problems with their marriage, or trauma from their career. The list goes on, and a psychotherapist wants to uncover what that trauma is. Furthermore, a person who is depressed may not understand that they are depressed. They may not feel they need to expand their self-awareness to help themselves. This plays into the theory that people become depressed without a cause, propagating the erroneous notion that only medication can uplift their state. People who suffer from depression can have lowered self-esteem, feel shame and guilt, and, at times, have suicidal thoughts. People who are sad are generally upset about something that has happened to them and can specifically point it out. They do not feel a lack of self-worth. An interesting point is that, in some cases, depression is associated with a euphoric mood known as mania, thus people who suffer from this type of depression are labeled manic depressives, or more recently, as people who suffer from bipolar disorder. They seem happy but deep down, are submerged in dissatisfaction for life. You only have to search on the internet to see how bipolar disorder affects many people regardless of their fame or wealth. Both those with bipolar disorder, who hide their depression with happiness, and classic depressives, who show their depression through sadness, have one thing in common according to psychotherapists. With both types, feelings of pain or wrath are subdued and not directed at those who caused them. Over time, this leads to self-hating to avoid the issue at hand that may have been caused by another person. Someone with depression would rather mask their true emotions than deal with them. I am not a medical professional or a psychotherapist, but I use many of these principles when I help those who approach me as a monk. People who are depressed need someone to listen to them, someone to support them. Although medication can help them arrive at the conclusion, they need to speak to someone because I feel the disease cannot be solved just by fixing the brain chemistry. Only by uncovering the cause of the depression and the unresolved trauma that lingers within, can it start to be solved. People with depression need to know that someone cares, and their emotions are allowed. They are allowed to feel angry, they are allowed to feel upset, they are allowed to feel manic. They need to mourn the life that was taken away from them just as one would mourn the loss of a loved one. For example, if someone experienced little love from their parents growing up, that person should get the validation that that action of their parents was wrong. It is the role of a parent to give love, and the depressive should have a space to mourn that loss of love they experienced. Within my own community, we find that those who practice spirituality can suffer from depression as well. This may come as a shock to you, as all those who practice spirituality are supposed to be happy, but, as stated earlier, we can fall into the trap of masking our state of mental well-being with spiritual practice. A few years ago, a young member of our community, Ajay, approached me with the symptoms of depression. He told me he was irritable with others, did not want to serve others, and really wanted to become a recluse. I probed him further, and he said he would binge eat anything he would get and just wanted to sleep, avoiding his duties. The symptoms he was experiencing were concerning. Ajay was the oldest of 4 brothers. He came from a middle-class background from one of the suburbs of Mumbai. For most of his life, he had shared a room with one of his youngest brothers, never really getting space to express himself. The oldest always sets the example. His father would chant to him as a mantra. Although most military families are not like this, his father, who had served in the military for a few years, was strict and trained his family as if they were living in the barracks. His philosophy was, "It is my way or the highway." He would not tolerate anyone raising their voice at him in the house, although he would scream at the incompetence of his sons. Ajay was not smart academically. Numbers were his enemy and letters were their sidekick. However, where he did excel was with a paintbrush. Ajay was gifted at art, but that was not valued in the household. He would dread parent-teacher meetings as he knew the maths, science, and English teachers would give him a below-average status, enraging his father. He knew that that evening his father's belt would come off and his other academically gifted siblings would laugh as he took the buckle end of it. Although his mother praised his artwork, his father would laugh at it, saying that this is not what real men do and will not get you a job in Mumbai. His father would mock him in front of relatives, telling them that it was first the worst, second the best with his children. It was hard for Ajay to open up. His mind was a fortress, as his father had trained him never to reveal what he was thinking. Being tough was what mattered. Raising his voice or expressing his emotions in his parental home was forbidden. Not to say there were never good times, but the experience of a regimented, harsh and unloving father can take its toll on anyone. Being berated once or twice can be manageable, but the constant sarcastic, condescending voice of your own father can be hurtful. The psychotherapists would understand Ajay's story as one of classic depression. Wanting to avoid addressing how his father treated him and, to some extent, did still treat him, Ajay would have probably pushed those emotions to the back of his mind. For Ajay, it was easier to live being berated than accept that his father was emotionally and verbally abusive. This is not to say parents cannot discipline and be strict with their children, but love must be the guiding force and intention. For Ajay, these suppressed feelings led to an emotional crisis, and therefore his reaction was that, as written above, Ajay had become a wreck. This wasn't a generalized anxiety disorder, but I understood it as depression. Only a qualified doctor would be able to diagnose it. Listening to and understanding Ajay's problem, I realized that there were 3 things he could do. Read more about his condition and see what he could do to help himself. Approach a qualified psychotherapist and keep coming to me for informal counseling. Approach a doctor to assess whether he needed prescription medication to help him. These 3 can all work together, but the ratio of how well they work depends on the magnitude of the problem. When the magnitude of our problem is less than our ability to deal with it ourselves, self-help works. When the magnitude of our problem is overwhelmingly greater than our ability to deal with it ourselves, we need to seek help either through medication, therapy, or both together. When someone is trying to lose weight, they may be able to do it themselves without any external guidance. However, in other cases, they may need to see a nutritionist or trainer or even undergo medical surgery. This analogy extends further. We have reached such a pinnacle moment in the state of our mental health as a planet. Just as morbidly obese people needing medical help have increased, those needing medication intervention to help them with their depression have also significantly increased. One should note that we might not always be the right people to help someone suffering from depression, and they might need medical help. When we are helping others deal with their depression, we should 1. Listen, help the person come to a state where they can accept that they have an issue. 2. Identify, help the person come to a state where they feel comfortable identifying that issue. 3. Empower, help the person gain their sense of worth and value, and help them see how they have the power to come out of it all. 4. Address, find a solution to their depression by one of the 3 solutions given above. It is important not to try and play the role of a qualified psychotherapist in this process. Affirmations. There is a famous saying, don't speak negatively about yourself, even as a joke. Your body doesn't know the difference. Words are energy and cast spells, that's why it's called a spelling. Change the way you speak to yourself, and you can change your life. What you're not changing, you are also choosing. You may have already heard of affirmations or positive affirmations. You can do it, you are valuable, you are loved, are all examples of phrases that people say as affirmations. They are positive statements that can help us overcome self-defeat and negative thinking patterns. Our thoughts become our words become our actions, and our actions become our character. Therefore, if we can change our thoughts and words, we can substantially improve how we behave. Positive affirmations may seem superficial and cringy, but research shows they work. Many of us do repetitive exercises to improve our health, such as going to the gym, but what about exercises for the mind? Positive mental repetitions can rewire our mind to help us change our outlook. This is not to say that your depression will be cured by positive affirmations. That would be a ludicrous claim, but literature does show that it can help. Positive affirmations can help us with stress. One study found that practicing affirmations for a short period of time a day can improve the problem-solving abilities of chronically stressed subjects to the same level as those with low stress too, but the research goes further. Another study suggested that affirmations can give us a stronger sense of self-worth that has tangible benefits in our actions. 3. For example, if we are depressed about our work ethic, affirmations can help us cement the values we aspire to have and believe in, helping us boost our own well-being. 3 ways to avoid feeling depressed. In the spiritual culture of Bhakti Yoga, we have a saying, "It could have been worse." This is a phrase you tell yourself, not others, when they are facing a calamity. There are many things we can do to save ourselves from feeling depressed or to prevent things from getting worse if we already suffer from depression, besides consulting a professional. As bad as depression can be, we can be helped by following these given ways of avoiding it. Just as by using an inhaler, an asthma patient can prevent their wheeze from turning into a full-blown asthma attack, similarly, there are many interventions you can do that can help you move away from feeling depressed. One thing to note with the points below is that science shows that depression can be due to genetic reasons in up to 40% of people. That means that some people have a greater predisposition to the disease than others. Some people will have a harder time with their mental well-being than others due to no fault of their own. However, we still have the other 60%, or the majority of which can be influenced to a large extent by our actions. Sleep. It's become fashionable to work until the point of exhaustion and scroll until the point of sleep. Getting enough sleep not only helps avoid physical illness, but also helps us with our mental well-being. On average, Doctors recommend that we get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a day. If we are getting quality sleep, we can avoid many of the symptoms of depression. Health checks. Seeing a professional could be important to check if there could be an imbalance with our hormones. A qualified healthcare professional will be able to tell if there is a deficiency or overactiveness in one of our hormones. It is important that we explore concrete medical tests in addition to time with a counselor or therapist. A simple blood test will be able to tell us our levels of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, etc. Many people also forget that a deficiency of vitamin D may be adding to their symptoms of depression. A simple walk in nature can boost their levels and have fantastic results over time. Diet. Eating healthy is an important factor in preventing depression. Fresh fruits, vegetables, grains, and plenty of water are key to defeating the disease. Do you snack or crave junk food when you are going through a hard time with depression? You are not alone. You are what you eat, physically and mentally. Therefore, it is important to eat fresh food. A word on coffee: avoid it after midday. This is because caffeine, the active ingredient in coffee, takes 12 hours to pass through our body. That's half the day. If we have coffee after midday, chances are we will still be awake at midnight. We want to avoid that, as having a good night's sleep is essential for us in preventing signs of depression. After I finished my lecture in London, a few medical students approached me to discuss their personal issues. They confirmed that they had also had pigeons making nests in their houses for a long time. I could not give them psychotherapy or medical advice, however, even if one of them were helped on their journey to combating anxiety and depression based on what I had shared with them, it was a success. Chapter Summary. The first step is to have a clear view or understanding of what we are dealing with. When a negative emotion makes a permanent residence within our minds and starts affecting our well-being, we should address it. Studies suggest that over 40% of us will suffer from depression in our lives. Talk therapy can help with symptoms of depression, low self-esteem, bereavement, addiction, and other severe mental health conditions. When the magnitude of our problems is overwhelmingly greater than our ability to deal with them ourselves, we need to seek help either through medication, therapy, or both together. Positive affirmations can help us overcome negative thinking patterns and have the power to rewire our mind to help us change our outlook. If we are getting quality sleep, regular health checks, and are eating well, we can avoid many of the symptoms of depression. Chapter 6. The Last Wish in a Pen Drive, Dealing with Guilt. Guilt is to the spirit what pain is to the body, said Elder Bednar. Returning from my lecture in central London to the serenity of the ashram at Buktivdanta Manor, I lay down to rest. At times I cannot help thinking, did I give that person enough time? Did I say the right thing? Could I have done more to help? The burden of being the person helping is sometimes greater than the one who needs help. We have to make sure that we are giving our best to those who seek our help. Let's take a minute to think about doctors. Although they may be seeing a number of patients a day and treating a variety of illnesses, the next patient is seeing the doctor for the first time. Therefore, they need to be focused at all times, although they may be tired. At times, doctors have approached me with their guilt at not having given a patient adequate time due to being fatigued and not being able to spend enough time with their family due to their strenuous profession. Responding to this is always challenging, but I do so from a place of empathy, as I have experienced a fair deal of guilt over the years in my quest to help others. I grew up in a loving family, but we did not have much in terms of material possessions. We lived in an old housing complex called a wada or chawl. There were 25 houses in one building that had common walls. It can be likened to terraced housing in the West, but the walls were paper thin. You could hear everything that was happening in the wada, from who was arguing about not doing the laundry to who was hosting a party. Everyone knew everything about everyone else. Although this sounds bad, it did bring a sense of community to the building. All of a sudden, you had many more aunties and uncles who would look out for you. At times, This did not work in my favor as my teenage activities were quickly reported to my mother and father. One thing that I do not miss about the Wada is the lack of toilets inside the building. The toilets were situated in an outhouse that was shared between 25 families. Just thinking about it, I can remember the stench that came from it and the queues that built up to use the bathroom. In the morning, it was not just you against your sibling to use the toilet, it was you against the entire complex. I guess this was training for when I would become a monk. We have nearly 100 monks all living together, and we share 10 toilets and shower rooms. It's first come, first served at 3:30 in the morning when we wake up. The early bird gets the worm and the early monk gets the shower. Back to my childhood. In our house, we had 6 people living together. It is quite customary in Indian culture to live as a large family unit. My grandparents, my mother, my father, my sister, and I lived in one of the 25 houses. It was congested in that house, but it was definitely a happy home as we had a common purpose to look after each other. My father worked for the Meteorological Department of India in the Administration Department. One habit I remember about him, come rain or shine, would be his smoking. He was a chain smoker going through packs of charm cigarettes. His voice was coarse from it and his fingers developed callus from where the cigarette would lie. My father knew that smoking was bad for him. Out of embarrassment, he would never smoke in front of my grandparents, but would not mind firing one up when they were not around. As children, we did not understand that smoking is so dangerous. It was just part of who my father was, a distinct characteristic that was emblematic of his personality. My mother, on the other hand, would get livid whenever he would smoke, but she would not overtly express her feelings. She would do everything she could to help him stop smoking, inspire him, help him, coax him, fight with him, literally do anything she could. However, her efforts always went in vain. Like clockwork, my father would go back to his lighter and tobacco, not being able to withstand the intense withdrawal symptoms. I remember vividly as a teenager a conversation between my mother and her friend who was visiting from out of town. Their voices echoed through the paper-thin walls into my room. They were sipping chai, gossiping and laughing as mothers do when they get together. It's not that I was eavesdropping, but it was hard to stop listening to what they were saying. My mother's friend was talking about her husband. All he does is smoke all day and smoke all night. Our son is now imitating his smoking habit to please his father. At that point, I came downstairs for a glass of water, but with my ears still red hot. Not true for me. I whispered to myself. I forgot about the walls. What was that? My mother said in Marwari, our mother tongue. I coughed up my water knowing that I had been heard. Nothing. It's just that knowing what smoking tobacco is doing to my father's health, I would never touch a cigarette in my life. You're a good boy, my mother's friend said. Although a teenager never wants to be a good boy, I was a fairly obedient child and blushed. I had a rocky relationship with my father. We were like chalk and cheese. There were many things that we clashed on, but smoking was one of the biggest. It was ruining his health and affecting my mother's happiness. Over time, as I grew through my teenage years, I stopped speaking to him. It seemed we would argue on every issue, so I thought it best to stop communication altogether. Don't get me wrong, he was a great dad and provided for us. Deep down I loved him and he loved me, but expressing ourselves was difficult. For nearly 2 years, we did not speak to each other. He tried to speak to me, but to no avail. I usually ignored him or brushed off his words to stop the conversation. My relationship with my mother was the other side of the spectrum to my father. We would speak all the time. I felt comfortable opening up to her. On reflection, the love of a mother is so visible, it's active, always there with the child, nourishing them. It gets noticed, appreciated, and celebrated. However, a father's love is seldom valued. Fathers also sacrifice and struggle for their children, yet because it is out of sight, it is often out of mind. Scientists agree with this analysis. Dr. Lars Perner, a consumer psychologist from the University of Southern California, told the BBC, "Most of us simply think our mothers deserve better or bigger presents. To some extent, right or wrong, mothers are often considered to be the biggest contributor to home life." He adds, "People tend to understand the sacrifices they make, that's what you see. Moms have a special place in people's hearts, there's a special idea of what they offer the family. On fathers," he says, "perhaps dads are also less interested in tangible tokens of appreciation. I think fathers think they don't really need expensive, showy trinkets, or anything like mom's bouquet of flowers. They're not typically gift-oriented. They generally don't expect anyone to feel an obligation to buy material items for them." One think about the difference between Mother's Day and Father's Day. Mother's Day was first celebrated in 1908, whereas Father's Day was established in 1966. That means it was only 60 years later that the world recognized that fathers do something. I sometimes hear the ladies in the temple tell their husbands that is the same period of time it takes for their husbands to complete household chores. Mother's Day is celebrated in 70 countries, whereas Father's Day is celebrated in only 59 countries. In the US, the average amount someone spends on their father is $135 on the weekend of celebrations. This is compared to around $186 on the similar weekend for mothers. This is constant around the world where both secular holidays are enjoyed. We spend a third more on our mothers than our fathers, $15.5 billion on fathers and $23.6 billion on mothers. This is not to underestimate or overstate their respective roles, and both are equally deserving of our love and respect. It's just that fathers can often get neglected when it comes to their share of appreciation. One evening as I was studying, my father came into my room and sighed. I ignored it, pretending to not hear it as I gazed into my textbook with my lamp creating shadows on my face. All of a sudden he fell at my feet, with tears in his eyes, and pleaded, "Please stop ignoring me. I am your father and I will try and change my habits. I cannot take you not speaking with me. Please speak to me." I turned away from his somber face as my mother entered the room. "What is wrong?" she asked me as I tried to get back to reading my textbook. She took my dad's side. "I think you should not be treating your father like this. You should talk to him. It's been long enough now, and you know how much he loves you." I could never say no to my mother, so the next day I decided to take baby steps to making conversation with him. After a couple of weeks, I was speaking to him again, but then a bombshell hit them. I left my career, my home, and my family to become a monk. That was devastating for them, as it was as if I had given up on society, given up on them, given up on providing them grandchildren and security. I knew that my decision was causing them a lot of pain. However, as a 21-year-old, I felt that I was serving a cause bigger than myself that would bring many more people happiness. In the first few years of my time as a monk, I would visit my parents' home every year. Every year, on the train journey from Mumbai to Pune after taking a vow of celibacy, I would think of apologizing to them for the pain I caused when I left. But I could not do it. A 3-letter word called ego stopped me from saying a 5-letter word called sorry. I also wanted to apologize to my dad directly for stopping all communication with him, but I had convinced myself that what I'd done was right. As a matter of fact, I only stopped talking to him so that he could feel the pressure and guilt of smoking, and this was my way of urging him to quit. And I'd done that for him and my mother. Something I did realize years later was that saying sorry does not always mean we are wrong. Even legally, apologizing is not an admission of guilt, it just means we are sorry for what the person is going through and value the person more than being right ourselves. This quote sums it up perfectly. What do we gain by proving that we are right? Rightness. But what do we lose? The person. That is not to say that we apologize unconditionally at all times or become a pushover. We have to learn how to place boundaries so that people learn to change and improve themselves for the wrong they do, but as Frederick Nail says, it takes both sides to build a bridge. A genuine, heartfelt apology can work wonders to free our restrained emotions. It can mend misunderstandings, weld broken hearts and make relationships blossom again after a harsh winter. It's ironic that as a monk I preach this philosophy, but back then, even though I was a practicing monk, I never apologized to my father. Despite his reservations about my life as a monk, which is a story for another book, my father had always been kind to me when I visited him. From how I see parents behave with their children at the temple, it is easy to see why parents forgive so easily. They still see you as a small child and sometimes even treat you as one. One year, he had asked me to bring him recordings of my talks from my tour in London. He could not travel to the temple in Pune or come to any of my lectures in Mumbai as he had been bedridden with Parkinson's disease for a few years. Parkinson's disease is horrible. It's a progressive nervous system disease that affects a person's movements. Symptoms start very slowly, with a barely noticeable tremor in just one hand. Most people suffering from it have tremors, but the disorder can also cause stiffness and slowing of movement, which deteriorates a person's quality of life significantly. I tried to cheer my father up that year, telling him that he would have to meet me at arrivals when I flew in from London so that I could give him the lecture recordings straight away. However, instead of my father rushing to the airport, I had to rush to him a few weeks after I had landed in Mumbai. I was meditating in the early hours of the morning. I usually do not take my phone with me to avoid distraction, but this morning I had accidentally taken it with me in my kurta pocket. My mother called me at 5 o'clock. She was an early riser but always understood that I wasn't to be called during these sacred sunrise hours. I answered. She sobbed uncontrollably down the phone, unable to speak. Another relative picked up her phone trying to calm her down. My father had just passed away. Her life, her best friend had left her alone. I was stunned. How does a monk react to the death of a loved one? How do they process these emotions? There is no amount of philosophy in the world that can cure the heartache of losing one that is closest to you, and there is not supposed to be. When you are sad, you are meant to feel sad. You are not meant to mask it over with philosophical jugglery. I drove from Mumbai straight away in preparation for my father's final rites. I grabbed my laptop, downloaded my talks from London that year onto a pen drive and put it in my pocket. On the journey to Pune, I held the pen drive in my hand, staring at it. I'd spoken so much on forgiveness and the art of communication. Thousands of people had listened to my lectures, yet I could not walk my talk in the case of my father. At that moment, I felt as small as the flies inside the vehicle. I was feeling the loss of someone who loved me dearly, but as I clutched the USB and tears streamed down my face, my overwhelming emotion was of guilt. The guilt of not having said sorry to him, the guilt of not having patched up my relationship with him out of ego, the guilt of the pain I'd caused him because of my attitude. I would never be able to say sorry again. As I reached the house, the energy was heavy. It was filled with people standing around holding cups of tea, not knowing what to say or how much small talk was appropriate. In the center of the house, however, was my family. I consoled them as the crowds of people watched my every action. I saw my father lying there still. I placed my pen drive in his hand and then grabbed his feet to offer my respects. I cried a few unseen, silent tears and whispered, "Dad, I am sorry. I shouldn't have done this to you, I shouldn't have done this to you." As we took his body to the funeral home. What happened next shocked my system. More on that later. We never know when we are going to lose those closest to us. Victories and achievements in proving that we are right are temporary, but the personal loss of someone dear is permanent. Was my apology even heard by him? Did it mean anything, or was it a mental gimmick to remove the burden of guilt in my heart? These thoughts swirled around my mind as I sat next to his body. Guilt trip? We have all gone through situations in life that we regret. Mine was most certainly with my father. My ego had blocked my path to a loving relationship with my father, causing him pain. We can let others down and feel guilty. We may speak harshly to them or deal with them inhospitably, disrupting their expectations of us. However, we may also feel guilty as we let ourselves down. We may feel disheartened as we are not able to keep up with the self-imposed expectations about our values and behavior. Not keeping a commitment to ourselves can lead to a reduction of self-esteem as we break trust with ourselves. Would you trust someone who broke their word repeatedly? It would be hard to trust them. Similarly, when we break our own commitments and our actions do not match our ideals, we lose trust in ourselves. At times it is easier to forgive someone else for breaking our trust, than to forgive ourselves for our own inadequacies. However, we must learn to deal positively with the emotion of guilt to help our mental well-being. Guilt can be constructive and destructive. It is constructive when it helps us correct a situation, improve ourselves, and when it displays that we have values, standards, and sensitivities to others. The lack of guilt suggests a lack of conscience that crumbles into shamelessness in our actions and the deviation of our moral compass. However, guilt-tripping ourselves, or destructive guilt, can have symptoms of a lack of self-forgiveness, magnifying the guilt out of proportion to the problem, and it does not lead to our growth and progression. At the same time, guilt can be reasonable and unreasonable. Reasonable guilt is the feeling of regret we have when we have actually wronged someone or ourselves, whereas unreasonable guilt is the negative feeling when we are not at fault and yet we go through regret and remorse. Dealing with reasonable guilt. Dealing with reasonable guilt is fairly straightforward. We can either fix the situation, fix ourselves, or move on. Fixing the situation or the mistake we made sounds easy, but as I explained in the case with my father, it can be difficult. While reading this, you may think that you would not make the same mistake, but the ego makes us forget to do the right thing because it is the hard thing to do. The human mind wants to take the easy way out and follow the path of least resistance. That means fixing a situation is left on the back burner while the ashes of guilt pile up. A senior monk once told me, repentance is passive rectification. But rectification is active repentance. If I hurt someone or failed to keep up with a personal commitment, true repentance is about correcting that issue. That is a healthy way of dealing with guilt. A saint is not one who does not make a mistake, but someone who knows how to correctly rectify their mistake. In my dealing with my father, if I had corrected my situation by reconciling immediately after he pleaded with me, there would be no room for guilt to unpack its bags. We need to reflect and then act. The quicker the better. This will help remove the burden of remorse that weighs us down. It may be hard at first, but being unconditional in our apology is the best way to say sorry even if it may have been their fault. This is the most we can do. If a person does not accept a genuine apology, at least we can rest knowing that we did the right thing and hopefully, someday, they will be able to forgive us. But what if there is no longer someone to apologize to? Does it mean that that guilt has to stay with us forever? I did not get to say sorry to my father. To this day, this affects my mind as time has taken the matter into its own hands to relieve me of an opportunity to address the issue at hand. The only way to get rid of that guilt, when no one is there to forgive us, is genuine repentance and trying to fulfill the expectations the person may have had from us. Fixing ourselves is even harder. If we are constantly in the wrong, making the same mistake over and over again, we should introspect and examine our behavior patterns to check if we are insensitive to others, which in turn causes damage to ourselves. If we are able to identify that there is a common thread in all our dealings, we can then work on changing those habits and conditionings in a way that we don't end up hurting others and thereby burdening ourselves with the guilt that follows. What if we have done everything we can to correct the situations or ourselves? What if we are still harboring negative feelings for our wrongdoings, which in turn are damaging our growth, peace, and mental health? Believe it or not, We cannot fix every problem we come across, as we are not the controllers of other people's actions or emotions. Humans are imperfect beings and can be irrational, always striving for perfection. Mistakes happen, tempers are lost, unpleasant words are spoken, harsh behavior takes place. This is all part of the human condition that we have to accept. To err is human, to forgive, divine. If someone wrongs us and offers a genuine apology, wouldn't we forgive, let go, and move on? We must treat ourselves with the same level of compassion. Self-forgiveness is foundational in moving on and rising above those negative feelings. We cannot forgive ourselves if we are wallowing in guilt. Think about it. Apart from sadists who take pleasure in seeing other people suffering, would even those that we have wronged feel happy if we held that guilt close to our hearts? My mother constantly reminds me that my father loved me dearly. Would he be happy to see me wallowing in a dark pit of guilt? Would he be happy seeing me constantly punish myself even though it was I who had wronged him? I believe he would not. Rather than only regretting our action, let us learn lessons from our experiences and avoid making the same mistake again. Dealing with unreasonable guilt. Changing our narrative with the right type of self-talk is important, though they are not quite positive affirmations. It's a state of mind to deal with ourselves with kindness. The ashram in Mumbai is unique as it is filled with highly educated monks who chose a life of celibacy. Many of them have a lot of professional corporate experience as engineers, doctors, and lawyers. This works well, as it means monks are able to connect with highly educated and sophisticated people. We also have some monks who are from very simple, rural backgrounds. Some are school dropouts, and some can barely speak English. When I joined the ashram, within no time I was interacting with some of the most affluent in our community. I was being respected, invited over to their homes for dinner, but monks from a simple background were not, as they would not fit in. I felt extremely guilty that here were monks who were senior to me. They were more advanced in their spiritual practices and had more experience and realization compared to me, and I was getting the adoration. I remember opening up to a senior monk about this issue. His advice was invaluable. He said, "I really appreciate your empathy towards these other monks. You must also know that you are not seeking this adoration. You have been gifted with certain abilities and they have been gifted with their own as well. Your abilities are bringing you this attention. Is that your fault? Rather than feeling guilty, be kind and empathetic to them. Never deal with them in a high-handed way with a holier-than-thou mindset. See what you can do for their growth and benefit. That's real action and not some unreasonable sentiment. And yes, just because someone doesn't have the same opportunity that you have, that does not mean you have to squander it in misery." Another tool we can use to deal with unreasonable guilt is to separate the constants and the variables. Many of my classmates from university have ended up working in some of the most prestigious companies. One such friend moved to the US to work in the technology industry. Like me, he lost his father and was not there when he left the world. But his story gets worse. He could not even come for the funeral due to immigration issues with his visa. This left him with tons of guilt that kept him up all night. He felt responsible for his father's passing. His thought pattern was, if I wouldn't have gone to the US, I would have been around my father when he needed me. I failed him as a son. I couldn't spend the time that I should have with him. I couldn't even attend his funeral. Imagine these words looping in your mind continuously. He approached me after 6 months of his father's passing, feeling like a wreck. I told him that his father's expensive medical treatment for his rare condition was only possible because of his job in the US. He would not be able to afford it here with a job in India. And it is because of that treatment that he could live a long and medically stable life. He added quality to his father's life. I went on to tell him of the times he did visit his father and how his parents flew across from India to the US at his expense. He did not come to complete his father's final rites not because he didn't want to but because he physically could not. In mathematical equations, we have constants and variables. For example, We have pi, a value that cannot be changed. There are world records for people repeating the numbers in p as fast as possible. Its value never changes, so it is called a constant. However, the value of x can change depending on the equation. Therefore, it is called a variable. We must identify the variables that are within our control and work on them, but also identify the constants, things that are beyond our control, and understand they will never change. The feelings of unreasonable guilt caused by them are irrational, and we should use this realization to aid our healing from them. If all else fails, we must remember to go easy on ourselves. We would not scream at others for making simple mistakes, yet our internal voice can be our harshest critic. The rise of social media has meant that we are constantly comparing ourselves, at times feeling the guilt for what we are not doing. In the ashram, we sometimes have a similar competitive nature between the monks. We have one monk who doesn't eat or drink for 5 days straight during a sacred time of the year. I remember trying that one year but could not keep up. Instead of feeling guilty, I went easy on myself. This should be the standard for all areas of life. We often impose on ourselves idealistic standards that we cannot keep up with and then feel guilty that we couldn't do it. There are definitely ideals that we all hold in high esteem. They may be related to our diet, exercise, study, relationships, and even meditation, but we have to learn how to forgive ourselves when we do not rise up to those high standards. What if we were realistic in our estimation of our capacity? What if we did what we could, and slowly, step by step, moved towards the ideal? We would live life happy and confident, rather than being miserable and guilty. Chapter Summary. We have all gone through situations in life that we regret. Guilt can be constructive and destructive. Oh, it is constructive when it helps us correct a situation and improve ourselves. A lack of guilt can suggest a lack of conscience. And slowly, step by step, move towards the ideal? We would live life happy and confident, rather than being miserable and guilty. Oh, destructive guilt can have symptoms of lack of self-forgiveness, magnifying the guilt out of proportion to the problem, and it does not lead to our growth and progression. Guilt can be reasonable and unreasonable. Oh, we can deal with reasonable guilt by rectifying the situation, changing ourselves for the better and or simply moving on if these two fail. Oh, for unreasonable guilt, we must identify the variables that are within our control and work on them, and also identify the constants, things that are beyond our control, and understand they will never change. In any case, self-forgiveness is foundational in moving on and rising above